Alrighty, so today we are finally doing the thing. I read your comments and finally found some time to do it. Here's my first compilation of over 3 hours of disturbing, insane, and darkest unsolved mysteries. I know you guys love to put these while playing, studying, or falling asleep, so I hope you'll love what I prepared for you tonight. Alright everyone, welcome back. If you're snuggled up in bed trying to drift off, maybe leave the lights on for this one. Tonight, we're venturing into the dark places of our national parks to talk about people who didn't come home. It's a strange contrast, being warm and safe under your blankets while hearing about the places where the forest takes everything. So, sip your tea, get comfortable, and let's go. I constantly find myself thinking about the Glico Morinaga incident. It remains an entirely unsolved mystery in Japanese crime history, and the details are absolutely baffling. Over 17 months, a shadowy syndicate calling itself the Monster with 21 Faces carried out a ruthless kidnapping and product tampering campaign. The crime spree started with the brazen abduction of a candy company president. It rapidly escalated to threats of mass poisoning, with the group claiming they had compromised candy sold nationwide. The culprits relentlessly taunted the police. They sent mocking letters. They evaded capture entirely. This failure happened despite an investigation involving over 1 million officers. The police pursued hundreds of thousands of leads, but never identified the perpetrators. I actually double-checked that officer count because it sounds completely impossible. More than 1 million officers participated in the investigation in some capacity between 1984 and 2000. The case closed officially in the year 2000. The incident started on March 18, 1984. 2 masked men broke into the home of Katsuhisa Ezaki. He was the president of Ezaki Glico, the company known for making Pocky and other popular treats. Around 9 in the evening, the intruders tied up Ezaki's wife and his young daughter. They abducted the executive straight from his bathtub. They drove him to a desolate warehouse in Osaka while he was still completely naked. The kidnappers quickly issued a ransom demand to the Glico Corporation. They asked for 1 billion yen in cash and 100 kilograms of solid gold bullion in exchange for Ezaki. I'd always found it fascinating that Ezaki managed to escape on his own. He broke out after about 3 days in captivity, long before the company paid any ransom. He could not identify his masked captors. The police had very few clues to follow. This dramatic abduction of a corporate executive sent shockwaves through Japan and set the stage for the bizarre events that followed. In the anxious weeks after Ezaki escaped, Glico faced more attacks. Unknown individuals set several company vehicles on fire in the factory lot. On April 16, 1984, someone left a plastic container filled with highly corrosive hydrochloric acid inside a Glico office building in Ibaraki. This was the exact same city where the kidnappers had held Ezaki. These acts of calculated sabotage clearly targeted the company's leadership. Around the same time, letters started arriving. The culprits revealed their bizarre alias, the Monster with 21 Faces. They borrowed that name loosely from a villain in classical Japanese fiction. Starting in April, the group sent a barrage of mocking letters to the police and the media. They openly ridiculed the authorities for failing to catch them. In one message addressed to the police, the writer arrogantly asked if they were stupid. The letter challenged them to act like professionals and catch the group. I have to assume the original Japanese sounded much more menacing. They even provided cryptic hints about their methods. They casually mentioned the type of car and equipment used in the initial kidnapping. Those clues ultimately proved entirely useless. The writers used a distinct Osaka dialect. Newspapers published the brazen letters, which massively amplified public interest in the ongoing case. In May 1984, the Monster with 21 Faces escalated the situation by threatening the national food supply. On May 10th, the group sent a letter to Glico's management claiming they had laced candies with a deadly cyanide compound. They warned they would place these poisoned candies on store shelves if the company refused their demands. This severe threat forced Glico to initiate a nationwide product recall. Supermarkets hastily emptied their shelves of Glico sweets. Consumers actively avoided the brand. Investigators never found any cyanide-laced Glico products. The threat appears to have been a very well-executed bluff. The scare still inflicted massive financial damage on the company. Glico reportedly lost the equivalent of $20 million. The company had to lay off hundreds of workers. In a country where lifetime employment was the norm, this humiliated the executives. The Monster with 21 Faces seemed to truly revel in the chaos. One letter gloated over Glico's mounting financial losses. I get the strong impression the criminals' true goal was to upend large food companies rather than collect a simple ransom. By late June 1984, the shadowy group announced a sudden ceasefire. In a puzzling message dated June 26, they proclaimed they were forgiving Glico. The harassment of that specific company stopped abruptly. Some people heavily suspect Glico paid a ransom in secret. I have not found any concrete evidence to support that theory. Glico and the public breathed a massive sigh of relief. The monster with 21 faces was not finished, though. They just shifted their sinister focus to other prime targets. The extortionists quickly turned their attention to Morinaga and Company, another confectionery giant. In October 1984, the group sent a chilling letter addressed to the moms of the nation. It warned that 20 packages of Morinaga candy contained lethal sodium cyanide. This time, the threat was undeniably real. Police scrambled to search stores from Tokyo to Osaka. They found more than a dozen tampered candy packages on retail shelves. The group had indeed placed lethal doses of cyanide directly into popular Morinaga products. They actually affixed warning labels on the packages reading that the contents contained toxins. They apparently did this to prevent actual physical harm to consumers. Fortunately, no one consumed the poison. The sinister message was clear. The perpetrators teased that future packages might not have helpful labels. This terrifying discovery caused widespread fear. Retailers aggressively boycotted Morinaga products. The company slashed its daily production by 90% during the crisis. This financial hit was even harder than the one Glico suffered. The monster with 21 faces issued direct extortion demands to Morinaga's leadership. On November 1st, 1984, the Morinaga vice president received a terrifying letter. It threatened to destroy the company if they did not pay 200 million yen. That ransom amounted to about $850,000 in 1984. Adjusting for modern inflation, that equals roughly $2.5 million today. The letter gave detailed instructions on how Morinaga should signal compliance. It told them to place a missing person ad containing a coded message in a specific daily newspaper on a certain date. Morinaga dutifully followed the bizarre instructions. They ran the ad with the secret keywords on November 6th. They effectively agreed to pay the money. The criminals never showed up to collect their prize. Around this highly chaotic time, the group expanded their severe threats to regional firms. They sent very similar letters to Marudai Ham and House Food Corporation. In June 1984, an undercover police officer posed as a Marudai employee. He attempted a high-stakes ransom drop of 50 million yen. He quickly noticed a suspicious man with fox-like eyes monitoring him from the shadows. Police strongly believed this unknown individual was the actual mastermind. The man managed to elude capture. The ongoing inability to catch the group became a profound embarrassment for law enforcement. The frustrating cat-and-mouse game continued deep into mid-1985. The criminals repeatedly sent letters. The police accumulated failure after failure. The immense stress of the situation culminated in a truly tragic event. In August 1985, Superintendent Shoji Yamamoto, the esteemed head of the Shiga Prefectural Police, set himself on fire out of sheer shame and professional remorse. Just 5 short days later, on August 12, 1985, the extortionists sent their final message. They coldly derided Yamamoto as stupid. They surprisingly declared they would halt their campaign. The typed letter announced they had decided to forget about torturing food-making companies. It claimed that any similar future crimes would merely be the work of copycats. The group's parting words were fittingly smug. They wrote that they were the bad guys, and that it was fun to lead a bad man's life. The monster with 21 faces vanished just as mysteriously as they had arrived. The horrific crime spree that terrorized the candy industry for 17 months finally ended. The perpetrators were absolutely never heard from again. In the long aftermath, the investigation went completely cold. The legal statute of limitations on the initial kidnapping of Katsuhisa Izaki expired in 1994. By 2000, all possible criminal charges related to the case reached their legal time limits. In February 2000, the National Police Agency formally conceded defeat. This was an unprecedented admission of total failure. Authorities never once identified the culprits. People have proposed many wild theories over the years about who exactly was behind these events. Investigators explored a very wide range of possibilities. No single theory has ever been proven. I will dive into the most plausible theories on this strange case. One prominent theory suggests an organized crime group, specifically a Yakuza gang, orchestrated the massive extortion campaign. The elaborate planning led police to initially suspect heavy Yakuza involvement. Kidnapping a CEO requires serious logistical power. One early suspect was Manabu Miyazaki. He was the son of a known Yakuza boss. He bore a striking resemblance to composite sketches of the infamous fox-eyed suspect. He had a documented history of anti-police activism and a past dispute with Glico. This made him seem like a very plausible mastermind. Police definitively cleared Miyazaki after he provided solid alibis. No direct links to any Yakuza organization were ever legally proven. While the Yakuza engage in corporate extortion, they typically operate covertly for profit rather than drawing intense police attention with public taunts. The monster with 21 faces behaved in a way entirely atypical of traditional organized crime. Investigators found no solid evidence implicating an established gang. Organized crime involvement remains a possibility. If a Yakuza group participated, they acted very much out of character. They were extraordinarily careful to leave absolutely no physical trace. Another fascinating line of speculation points to someone with intimate inside knowledge acting out a bitter vendetta. Some thought a deeply disgruntled Glico employee might have sought revenge against the company's leadership. Glico's president had been involved in a contentious labor dispute a decade earlier. This pointed heavy suspicion toward individuals connected to that incident. Others quietly questioned if Izaki himself staged the entire kidnapping. Izaki firmly denied the absurd implication. Police totally cleared him. People whispered about possible leaks from within law enforcement itself. The culprits always remained one step ahead of the cops. No proof of a police insider ever surfaced. Given the enormous number of officers involved, an internal leak remains a very real possibility. Exhaustive interviews with company staff did not yield any viable suspects. An inside job cannot be entirely ruled out. Alternative theories claim rival companies engaged in severe corporate sabotage to damage Glico and Morinaga. The confectionery market is incredibly big business. Glico's near-crippling losses could have massively benefited its direct competitors. One variant of this theory suggests a calculated stock manipulation scheme. An opportunistic investor might have shorted Morinaga's stock. They knew the share value would plunge rapidly once the poisonings became public. They could have escaped with a massive profit. Morinaga's stock did fall drastically during the ensuing panic. This could have yielded huge profits for anyone forewarned. Investigators closely examined individuals who traded heavily in those specific stocks. They found no conclusive evidence of such a plot. This strategy has a major glaring flaw. Any large fortuitous trade would have immediately set off regulatory alarm bells. Anyone with sufficient market knowledge to short stocks aggressively in the 1980s would have keenly known this issue. Despite the plural 21 Faces moniker, some wonder if the mastermind was a brilliant lone wolf, acting on a twisted personal agenda. The dramatic theatrical flair hints at a vigilantism element. Some speculate this was someone driven by a deep personal sense of superiority over the authorities. The letters openly displayed a game-like attitude toward outwitting the police. This suggests a potential lone wolf who derived a twisted thrill from the chase itself. Perhaps the most culturally interesting theory suggests the entire thing was a coordinated North Korean psychological attack on the Japanese populace. North Korean agents absolutely abducted Japanese citizens in the 1980s. They definitely had the covert resources for such sprawling operations. Ultimately, every single theory hits the exact same wall. There is a total lack of solid proof. The true identity of the perpetrators sadly remains completely unknown to me, and to the world at present. I want to tell you about Stephen Clark. He was 54 years old, a really devoted father who lived in Wareham, Dorset, England. People in that tight-knit community genuinely liked him. He was a cheerful guy. But lately he had been dealing with some incredibly tough health problems. Doctors diagnosed him with Huntington's disease. If you are not familiar with it, it is a severe hereditary condition that breaks down brain function over time. His family watched it slowly take a toll on his memory and his coordination. They stepped up, doing absolutely everything they possibly could to make sure he stayed comfortable and happy. Then, late January 2023 came around and sheer panic set in. On the morning of January 6th, Steve went about his regular routine. People saw him in a local shop in Wareham right around 9 a.m. About an hour later, locals spotted him standing outside the Garden Gate Tea Room at 10 a.m. But Stephen never made it back home. Naturally, his family panicked and frantically called the Dorset police. Because of his highly vulnerable health, officers treated it as an emergency right away and launched a massive search. They checked CCTV cameras, which picked up his very last steps. He was walking slowly down Bell's Orchard Lane near 11 a.m. After that entirely mundane moment, he just vanished. Nobody has seen or heard from him since. The people in Wareham really rallied around his devastated family. Dorset police teamed up with the Coast Guard, the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, and the Hampshire Search and Rescue Team to scour the area. Police heavily suspect he might have accidentally slipped into the River Frome or the River Piddle. Searchers dragged both rivers for miles. They found absolutely nothing. Now, investigators are begging anyone driving through Wareham on January 6th to check their personal dash cameras. They have meticulously combed through more than 400 homes and yards, but they still have zero leads. Stephen is a white man with brown hair, standing exactly 5 feet 1 inch tall. He has a slim build and walks with a very distinct golden walking stick. If you have any information at all, please call the Dorset Police on 101, quoting case number 552300014390. Now we move forward to the evening of December 28, 2022, to talk about Peter Bagland. He lifted himself off the sofa and told his wife Michelle that he was heading out for a walk. He promised he would be back soon. Over a month later, he is still missing. Peter was 55 years old. He and Michelle have been married for more than 20 years. He even had her name tattooed right there on his neck. They built a quiet, comfortable life in Greater Manchester. Doting on their 4 grandchildren, they had actually just finished celebrating the birth of their very first great-grandchild. According to Michelle, there was absolutely nothing out of the ordinary that night. Nothing that would make her think he was walking out of her life forever. It was a normal routine for Peter to wander down the local canal towpath in the evenings, just walking and listening to his music. At 7:38 p.m., a CCTV camera caught him at a Texaco garage over in Moseley Common, buying a bottle of whiskey. Roughly 35 minutes passed before Michelle decided to call his phone just to check in. Peter answered. He told her he was strolling along the Bridgewater Canal, trying to clear his head. He never actually specified what was bothering him, though. Michelle was worried, naturally, but he reassured her he would be home soon. His final words on that call, "I love you, you are my world, he never came home." When Michelle tried calling him again, the phone just rang out. She immediately reported him missing to the police. The very next day, a chilling discovery was made along the canal towpath. Searchers found Peter's phone, his hat, his earphones, all sitting together. It seemed entirely possible, likely even, that he had slipped and fallen into the freezing canal. This prompted a massive police underwater search covering that entire stretch of water. More than 200 local volunteers joined the physical search efforts along the banks. Nothing. No further clues materialized. The sheer absence of any other belongings he might have had on him only deepened the mystery. Where did he go? His family firmly believes that somebody out there knows exactly what happened to him or where he is right now. They are desperately urging anyone with even a fragment of information to contact Greater Manchester Police at 101, or you can call Crime Stoppers at 0800-555-111. If you are looking out for him, Peter is 5 feet 10 inches tall. He has gray hair, and do not forget that distinctive tattoo on the left side of his neck. Well, let us start in 1976 with Sherry Roach. She was a 17-year-old girl living in a group home in San Mateo, California. She had endured a deeply turbulent childhood, growing up in Santa Rosa in what her younger brother Jerry described as a violently unstable household. This instability drove Sherry into the foster system, bouncing between multiple group homes just to find some basic safety. You know, these environments were far from ideal. Sherry ran away frequently, a coping mechanism, basically. Despite all this chaos, she held on to one constant: her brother. Whenever she took off, she would always, without fail, reach out to let Jerry know she was okay. Right? That was her pattern. By June of 1976, she was still based in San Mateo. She had managed to secure a part-time job over in San Francisco, a distance of roughly 20 miles. To get to work, she relied heavily on public transit or hitchhiking, which, was pretty standard for teenagers in the 1970s. Then came the morning of June 8, 1976. Sherry walked out of her group home to catch her usual bus into the city. Just another ordinary commute, except she never made it back. A counselor eventually reported her missing after she failed to return from her shift. So what did the San Mateo Police Department do? They launched an investigation. Though by modern standards, it was frustratingly bare bones. Listen to Detective Tom Pollan speaking about this back in February 2020. The officers back in 1976 did a cursory interview with some people that either worked with her or that knew of her, and there were not any substantial leads at that particular time. Basically, they wrote her off. Reading between the lines, it is obvious they pegged her as just another runaway. Because she lacked a strong family unit to aggressively advocate for her, the case quickly went cold. Yes, she had a documented history of running away. You can see why authorities leaned that direction. But remember her brother? The fact that absolutely no one heard from Sherry after June 1976 was an enormous red flag. This sudden silence shattered her usual pattern. She had not just started over somewhere new. Something terrible, something final had intercepted her. The investigation stalled and never formally closed. Given her reliance on hitchhiking, detectives had to consider the darkest possibilities. Like a predator targeting young, vulnerable women along the highway. True crime historians know exactly what California was like in the 1970s. Ground zero for serial predators. They even cross-referenced her name with the November 1978 Jonestown tragedy down in Guyana, since a huge number of victims were from the Bay Area. Nothing. Her name was not on the manifest. Decades slipped by. Nothing happened until 2020. Out of nowhere, a startling new clue surfaced. Sherry's mother, still living in Northern California, was sorting through some old family boxes. She found a photograph. Written on the back, 1975, the image showed a teenage Sherry standing beside an unidentified young man, his arm draped casually over her shoulders. Why does this matter? Because no one in her family had ever seen this picture. They had zero idea who the man was. Sure, relatives remembered vague rumors from the 70s about an older boyfriend, but they never had a name, they never had a face. Suddenly, they had a snapshot that was likely one of the very last pictures taken of Sherry before she vanished. That man instantly became a person of interest. In February 2020, San Mateo police released the photograph to the public, hoping someone, somewhere, could name him. Authorities described him as a black male, likely in his early 20s, standing around 6 feet tall. To be clear, police have not officially labeled him a suspect, but given his obvious proximity to Sherry shortly before she disappeared, he is absolutely an important witness. Yet, despite the widespread release of the image, the silence continues. No new evidence. The man remains a ghost. Let us move on to the case of Lucinda Miller. On October 16, 2022, security cameras recorded her in southeast Melbourne. It was exactly 11 a.m. She wore a warm jacket and a beanie. Less than an hour after that footage was taken, she disappeared entirely. She left her loved ones terrified and completely baffled. Lucinda was exactly 24 years old at the time. She had lost a noticeable amount of weight recently, and some reports mentioned she might have been dealing with some underlying health problems. Right after she appeared on that camera, Lucinda ordered an Uber. The driver dropped her off about 30 minutes later near Belgrave. I should mention, this is a heavily wooded, remote bushland area. It sits roughly 2.5 kilometers from her actual house. There is a hiking trail right there that easily could have led her straight home. Except, she never arrived. At first, her close family and friends did not panic, but by the next day, a friend put out an urgent plea online, asking anyone who saw her to immediately call the police or an ambulance. A week passed. The media picked up the story. Then a deeply worrying detail came out. Someone had intentionally turned off her phone the day after she vanished. Every incoming call went straight to voicemail. Search teams focused hard on the remote bushland where the Uber dropped her off. But as days went by, it looked like she had actively walked right out of that zone. A day after the original camera footage, someone claimed they saw her 8 kilometers away in Bayswater East. Police expanded their massive search grid immediately. Still, there was absolutely no sign of her. Investigators believed the sighting was credible, but they never found any video evidence to physically back it up. The trail went completely cold. Even so, her friends stubbornly kept organizing their own desperate searches. Police came out and stated they definitively do not think anyone else was involved. They cleared the helpful Uber driver right away. The terrifying reality is that it looked like she simply did not want to be found. But surviving out in those harsh elements without proper shelter, the odds were awful. Then in November, 2 highly compelling reports came in. On November 5th, someone matching Lucinda perfectly was seen way down in Portland, southwest Victoria. 3 short days later, another credible person spotted her in Colac. Lucinda is 5'5", blonde, and has a very thin build. She was last seen wearing pink pants. During that Colac sighting, witnesses noted she was actively pushing a black shopping cart. If you have any idea where Lucinda Miller is right now, please instantly call local police at 56-222-7111. Her devoted family is completely desperate for answers. We shift our focus halfway across the globe to Childers, a town in Queensland, Australia. Investigators there recently released important security footage of an 82-year-old man named Peter Hodgkins. He vanished without a trace, and authorities are completely desperate to locate him. Peter disappeared on May 19, 2024. No one has seen or heard a single word from him since that day. The local police have issued an urgent, widespread appeal, begging the public to keep their eyes open. Let us look at his last known movements. The final confirmed sighting comes from a CCTV camera mounted outside an aged care facility on Morgan Street. The footage shows Peter exiting the building at precisely 6:46 p.m. Reports indicate he began walking south, heading in the direction of Broadhurst Street. After that, the trail goes totally cold. He has not made contact with a single friend or family member. If you watch the video closely, you see Peter walking out alongside another man. Peter stops. He points off into the distance while chatting with this unidentified individual. The problem is, the camera angle cuts off. We cannot see which direction Peter actually took after that conversation ended. The moment he was reported missing, a massive search grid was established around the care home. We are talking drones in the sky, trail bikes ripping through the scrub, and dozens of people on foot. They found absolutely nothing. Not a single belonging. The hunt is still very much active today. Investigators are pleading with anyone living in the immediate area to scrub through their private security cameras. Any scrap of footage from that evening could establish a concrete timeline. It could pinpoint his direction of travel, giving search teams a much better chance of bringing him home. There's also a running theory that Peter might have traveled toward the Townsville area. Residents up there have been warned to stay highly vigilant. Emergency responders are growing more terrified by the hour. Time is the enemy here. Peter suffers from dementia. He is highly vulnerable, and the temperatures in Queensland are already starting to plummet with the arrival of the Southern Hemisphere winter. He is described as a frail older man. Surviving out in the harsh elements for this long is a horrific thought. Police have thrown every single resource they have at this case, but so far, nothing.
Tank.
Intensive sweeps through the dense bushland surrounding the aged care facility turned up completely empty. This has led to another theory. What if a well-meaning motorist saw an elderly man walking along the road and offered him a lift? A driver who had no idea they were picking up an active missing person. Hope flared briefly when police received a tip-off about a sighting on Thompson Road. Officers swarmed the area. They knocked on doors, searched surrounding properties. They never found him. To this day, nobody actually knows if the man spotted on Thompson Road was even Peter. To streamline the operation, authorities have set up a dedicated search and rescue headquarters right out of the Childers police station, processing tips in real time. If you want to volunteer for the physical ground search, you can just contact the station directly. When he walked out of that facility, CCTV shows Peter wearing a pair of blue jeans, a blue polo shirt, brown shoes, and a heavy dark coat. If you have seen this man, if you have any idea where he might be resting today, you are strongly urged to call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-333-000. You can also log on to the Police Link website and submit a suspicious activity form. Please, make the call. I also want to discuss a missing persons case that has always bothered me. In 2014, police from the Isle of Wight in the United Kingdom urgently appealed to the public. They needed citizens to look out for a 53-year-old woman who inexplicably went missing. Over a decade later, she has still not been found. On June 7, 2014, Victoria Bailey boarded the number 12 bus. She traveled to a coastal area called Freshwater and calmly got off. Definitive CCTV footage from the bus proved this. After she went missing, investigators reviewed the tape. The clip clearly shows Victoria getting on the bus and paying her fare. It later shows her leaving the bus and walking away entirely on her own. She does not appear to be in any distress whatsoever. This makes her sudden disappearance all the more baffling. When police formally learned Victoria vanished, they organized a massive search. They covered the immediate area and the nearby ocean. They spent several long days searching, but were entirely unsuccessful in locating her. Investigators formally released a photo of the exact cell phone model she carried. It was a silver or black Samsung GTE 2550. Searchers have never found the phone. At 9 in the morning on June 19th, a frantic witness contacted the police. The caller reported spotting Victoria. She was supposedly walking on New Barn Road toward York Avenue in East Cowes. The witness explicitly stated the woman wore a purple blouse and black capri pants. This tip prompted another massive search of the area. Once again, searchers found no sign of Victoria. It remains entirely unknown whether the woman seen that morning was actually Victoria. Police interviewed people in the immediate area. No one had seen the woman in question. Following this, Victoria's desperate family made an emotional appeal to the public for absolutely any information. People heavily speculated she might have walked the Tennyson Trail. That is a highly challenging 14-mile hike stretching from Carisbrooke to the Needles. No evidence has ever been found that she actually entered the trail. Her sister, Lisa Lauren, made a public appeal directly to Victoria. She pleaded with her sister to contact the family just to assure them she was fine. Lisa added that Victoria did not have to disclose her actual location. The family just desperately wanted to hear from her. With practically no further leads, police pleaded with other passengers on the number 12 bus to come forward. They asked for any tiny piece of information, such as where Victoria might have gone after getting off. They speculated she might have spoken to a fellow passenger and mentioned her plans for the day. Nobody has ever come forward with additional information. Victoria was last seen wearing a beige jacket over a dark top. She also wore blue jeans and sunglasses. She actively carried a backpack. Investigators heavily believe she may have changed her outfit since she was last seen on camera. If you have seen Victoria or have absolutely any information on her cold case, I strongly urge you to contact the Newport Police Station. You can reach them by dialing 101. You should refer to case number 44142577. I have spent considerable time researching the Knights Templar. They are a highly famous medieval military order subject to wild legends and endless theories. One of the most persistent claims is that the powerful Templars secretly worshipped a mysterious idol called Baphomet. This was a severe charge first levied against them during their dramatic 14th century trials. The term Baphomet actually appeared decades before the trials even began. It emerged during the Bloody Crusades. In a 1098 letter, a crusader described Muslim Turks calling upon Baphomet at the grueling siege of Antioch. Most modern scholars interpret this as a simple corruption of the name Muhammad. Medieval European crusaders generally mischaracterized Islam as pure idolatry. They wrongfully believed Muslims worshipped Muhammad as an actual god. By the late 13th and early 14th century, Baphomet fully entered the Christian lexicon. It became a dark term denoting a pagan or false idol. Against this tense historical backdrop, the Knights Templar suddenly fell under deep suspicion. On October 13, 1307, King Philip IV of France ordered the shocking mass arrest of Templars operating in his country. His massive financial debts to the incredibly wealthy order largely motivated this drastic move. He basically harbored a deep desire to outright seize their valuable assets. Philip operated with the willing cooperation of Pope Clement V's inquisitors. He aggressively accused the Templars of numerous vile heresies. The authorities leveled over 100 distinct charges against the order. These included denying Christ, spitting on the Holy Cross, and illicit practices. Worshipping an idol named Baphomet featured prominently among the accusations. Many of these harsh charges closely mirrored those earlier aimed at other bitter enemies of the church, such as the Cathars. This heavily suggests the inquisitors used a convenient template of charges rather than investigating unique misdeeds. Under the extreme pressure of physical torture and brutal imprisonment by the medieval Inquisition, some Templars eventually confessed. The idol of Baphomet featured in several of these forced confessions. The descriptions varied wildly. According to the official trial records, different Templars gave highly contradictory accounts. Some described a severed head, others mentioned an idol possessing 3 faces. Others spoke of a human skull, or even a strange cat figure as the main object of veneration. I must strictly note that no physical idol or tangible evidence of Baphomet was ever produced. The name Baphomet did not even appear in the initial royal arrest warrants or the formal papal charges. Those early documents only generically accused the Templars of the adoration of idols. The highly specific name emerged solely from the brutal interrogations. This heavily suggests the leading questions or paranoid expectations of the Inquisitors drove the entire narrative. Of 231 knights relentlessly interrogated in Paris, only 12 confessed to knowing absolutely anything about Baphomet. That is barely 5%. Far greater numbers confessed to much more routine claims of blasphemy. This vast disparity clearly indicates that the Baphomet charge was not widely substantiated, even under extreme physical duress. The zealous inquisitors did not take this to mean that Baphomet did not exist. They bizarrely concluded the Templars held Baphomet so dear they would simply refuse to name the precious idol. During the lengthy trials, many Templars bravely withdrew or recanted their false confessions when they were away from the torture chambers. Contemporaries were often highly skeptical of the outlandish accusations. Even Pope Clement V initially doubted Philip's wild allegations. Outside of France, papal investigations in regions like England, Portugal, and the Holy Roman Empire found practically little evidence of heresy. Many accused Templars in those specific regions were eventually exonerated or given very light penances. In France, Philip's immense political pressure prevailed. The Templars' Grand Master Jacques de Molay dramatically retracted his forced confession after years of brutal imprisonment. He firmly declared the ancient order's total innocence. For his astounding audacity, the authorities mercilessly put him to the torch in 1314. Modern historians widely agree that the Templars' supposed worship of Baphomet was an entirely false charge lacking any genuine historical proof. The overwhelming consensus is that the confessions were heavily coerced and thoroughly unreliable. They relied completely upon the typical brutal methods associated with the infamous Inquisition. Many historical contemporaries did not believe the Baphomet confessions were legitimate at all. They did suspect that many Templars had quietly become crypto-Muslims. Modern historians generally dismiss the idea that the Templars would en masse adopt the strict doctrines of their mortal enemies. There were, however, rare cases of individual Templars converting to Islam. Robert of St. Albans, an English Templar, became Muslim and officially joined up with Saladin in the 1180s. He was granted the rare right to marry one of Saladin's relatives for his treasonous action. These isolated acts profoundly shocked Christendom. They may have eventually led to the festering idea that Templars harbored a secret sympathy for their sworn enemies. No credible evidence has ever emerged that the Templars literally venerated anything called Baphomet. Although the Church dissolved the mighty Templars and subsequently exonerated them in later years, the lurid idea of their dark occult practices did not vanish. After long centuries of obscurity, the Baphomet legend revived heavily in the 19th century amid a huge resurgence of interest in the Templars, Freemasonry, and the occult. Enlightenment and Romantic-era writers began wildly speculating about what hidden ancient wisdom the Templars might have possessed. In 1818, the Austrian Orientalist Joseph von Hammer-Purgstall published a controversial essay. He falsely claimed to have found actual Templar Baphomet idols. He loosely linked the order to obscure Gnostic sects. A major turning point came with the French occultist Eliphas Levi right in the mid-19th century. He famously illustrated Baphomet as the Sabbatic goat. This was a winged, goat-headed androgynous figure heavily laden with esoteric symbolism. Levi took the ancient name Baphomet and entirely transformed it into a complex symbol of cosmic balance in his own occult philosophy. Levi genuinely believed that Templars had used the name. Since that specific time, Levi's iconic goat-like depiction of Baphomet has easily become the best-known image of this fictional entity. I think it is highly important to remember that the Sabbatic goat was never historically associated with the actual Templars. It was not based on contemporary Inquisition accusations either. The idea that the Templars worshipped a demon named Baphomet is a complete myth. It just happens to be a very powerful myth that still carries a ton of cultural weight almost a full millennium later. The mysterious disappearance of a young man named Greg Weiss Jr. On March 21, 2000, Greg calmly left his father's home, located in Princeton, Louisiana. He fully intended to visit a close friend in the nearby small community of Taylortown. Someone last physically saw him in the early evening of that day. He was driving his truck on U.S. Highway 71 right near the busy intersection with Willis Road and Highway 527. According to a friend, someone reportedly dropped Greg off at a local bar situated along Louisiana Highway 1 later that exact same evening. After that highly specific point, Greg Weiss Jr. simply vanished. He was absolutely never heard from again. His family quickly grew concerned when they finally realized he had not safely returned home or contacted anyone. They officially reported him missing to the authorities. A few short days after Greg's unsettling disappearance, on March 24, 2000, authorities made a critical discovery. Police suddenly found Greg's dark brown 1984 Chevy pickup truck completely abandoned on a desolate roadside in the Taylortown area. Investigators safely found Greg's wallet and his other personal belongings inside the locked vehicle. They found absolutely no sign of Greg himself. The aging truck appeared to be in perfectly working condition. There were practically no immediate physical indications of a violent struggle at the scene. His functional vehicle and wallet were simply left behind. This strongly suggested something entirely unexpected had happened. Given these highly suspicious circumstances, the Bossier Parish Sheriff's Office very quickly began treating Greg Weiss's sudden disappearance as a highly possible case of foul play. In the long days and weeks following Greg's disappearance, dedicated law enforcement officers undertook extensive efforts to finally find him. They thoroughly interviewed the friend who last saw Greg. They aggressively followed up on the initial account that someone casually left Greg at a busy bar on Highway 1 that night. Investigators thoroughly canvassed the bar and all surrounding areas. They desperately hoped to find anyone who might have actually seen Greg after he was purportedly dropped off. They sadly found absolutely no evidence that he was ever even there. Police also extensively searched the immediate vicinity where they found Greg's pickup truck abandoned. They looked for literally any clues or trace evidence. They found absolutely no further information. As of right now, I have found essentially no solid indication as to what may have ultimately happened to Greg. His haunting case has attracted surprisingly very little attention in the media and online over the years. I feel strongly that we need to keep talking about cases like his so they are not entirely forgotten. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to the show. I want to share a story that begins in late April 1981. As I was going through the details of this specific case, it starts with a group of young men making a grim discovery along a rural road in Newton Township located near Troy, Ohio. They found the body of a young woman lying in a ditch. She wore jeans, a turtleneck sweater, and a very distinctive tasseled buckskin poncho. I noticed right away in the reports that she was completely barefoot. She carried no identification on her person, making immediate identification impossible. Local police arrived at the scene, and an official investigation into the young woman's death began right away. An autopsy later revealed she had been brutally slain. She suffered severe blunt force trauma to her head and neck. After that attack, she was strangled, likely about 2 days before her body was found. The medical examiner noted a laceration on her liver, consistent with a violent assault. I found it quite surprising, just as the initial investigators did, that there were no signs of any illicit assault on the victim. The young woman appeared to be in her late teens or early 20s. She had reddish-brown hair, neatly braided into pigtails. She had very well cared-for teeth, indicating she likely enjoyed a good upbringing. These details painted a perplexing picture for the detectives working the case. The victim clearly didn't fit the typical profile of a transient person living on the streets. But yet no one knew who she was. With no name to call her, investigators and the media gave her a nickname based entirely on her clothing. The fringed suede poncho led to her being dubbed the Buckskin Girl. She quickly became one of the most famous Jane Doe cases in the country. From the very outset, Ohio authorities worked diligently to identify her. Because the body was found relatively soon after death, police took her fingerprints and dental records for comparison. Back in 1981, limited computer databases existed. Her prints matched no criminal records. Her dental information failed to match any known missing persons reports. Investigators released a composite sketch of her face to newspapers and television stations. They genuinely hoped someone would recognize her. These efforts generated around 200 tips in the weeks following the slaying. Unfortunately, none of those leads ever panned out. As time went on, the case grew cold. The authorities preserved all the physical evidence from the crime scene in remarkably good condition. This included her clothing along with samples of her blood. They held on to the hope that future technological advances might break the case wide open. In 2001, they generated a full DNA profile of the victim from the preserved blood sample. Then, in 2008, the Buckskin girl was entered into the newly created National Missing and Unidentified Persons System database. She became one of the very first cases included there. I read that in 2016, investigators performed isotope analysis on her hair and a detailed pollen analysis on her clothing. They aimed to learn exactly where she had been in the days and months before her death. These tests suggested intriguing details. She had likely spent quite a bit of time in the southwestern United States shortly before she died. Conversely, pollen found on her shirt and in her clothing pointed to extended time spent in the northeastern United States or Canada during the year prior to her death. This lined up with the theory that she was a transient or hitchhiker who traveled long distances across the country. The victim's clean, bare feet at the crime scene supported the idea that she hadn't walked to the dump site herself. Police believed she was slain elsewhere. Perhaps this happened indoors or inside a vehicle. The perpetrator likely left her body beside the Ohio road not long after her death. The major breakthrough finally came nearly 37 years after the act. By 2018, genetic genealogy had emerged as a new forensic method. This allowed investigators to identify victims or suspects by matching DNA to distant relatives through public genealogical databases. Miami County authorities partnered with a volunteer organization called the DNA Doe Project. Using the blood sample preserved from 1981, forensic scientists obtained a high-quality DNA profile. They uploaded it to a public genealogy database. In March 2018, within only a few hours of analysis, genealogists found a potential family connection. In early April 2018, the Miami Valley Regional Crime Laboratory confirmed the identification. They obtained DNA from a relative of the missing woman and compared it directly to the victim. In a press conference held on April 11, 2018, authorities officially announced that the Buckskin girl had been identified as Marcia King. She was a 21-year-old woman from Arkansas. Marcia King had last been seen by her family back in 1980. She left home in Little Rock and traveled out of state. Because she was an adult and no one suspected she was in immediate danger, her family never filed an official missing persons report. Marcia King's identification completely changed how law enforcement handled these situations. She was one of the first unidentified victims ever identified through forensic genetic genealogy. This technique soon became famous for helping solve countless other cold cases. Marcia's family quietly hoped for her return for years. They finally had closure about her fate, even though it was a sad confirmation of her death. In Ohio, the generic Jane Doe headstone at her grave was replaced. The new marker bears Marcia's real name. A memorial service was held where local residents and officers paid their respects. The identification renewed energy in the homicide investigation. Knowing Marcia's identity gave detectives fresh leads about where she had been and who she associated with. Even with her identity known, the question of who ended her life remains unanswered. Before she was identified, investigators considered she might have been a teenage runaway or a hitchhiker traveling across multiple states. After her identification, I learned she often hitchhiked and maintained ties to multiple cities during her travels, like Pittsburgh and Louisville. Her well-kept appearance indicated she wasn't living homeless on the street. She likely had places to stay or people helping her along the way. I've read speculation that she may have been living out of a vehicle, like a van, when she met her untimely end. Internet sleuths speculate she may have been slain by an unknown boyfriend or male traveling partner. Others think she may have been involved in a traveling cult. Some circumstantial evidence supports this theory. Given the era and Marcia's red hair, detectives examined possible links to known serial perpetrators. In 1985, her case was briefly considered possibly related to the redhead slayings. This was a series of violent acts against red-haired young women across the United States. This connection was eventually ruled out. Evidence recovered from those crime scenes and other case specifics simply didn't match. Others wondered if Marcia might have been an early victim of an unidentified serial wrongdoer nicknamed Dr. No. This individual targeted women along Ohio highways in the 1980s. Despite these theories, no known suspect has ever been arrested or charged in Marcia King's slaying. There have been positive movements in the investigation. Since her identification, investigators pieced together some of her final movements. Marcia was reportedly seen in early April 1981 in Louisville, Kentucky. She possibly was involved with a traveling religious group or cult around the time of her death. Authorities still believe the most likely person responsible for Marcia's slaying is an unidentified boyfriend. Let me take you to March 14, 1998. 39-year-old Lenny Derrickson and his teenage son Jared were quietly beginning what seemed to be a perfectly typical day. They were working together on their family-owned dairy farm located in Strong City, Oklahoma. That specific morning, right around 9 a.m., an unknown stranger slowly drove a white Ford pickup truck straight up to their rural farmhouse. Lenny casually stepped outside to converse with the unidentified man. The ensuing conversation appeared entirely friendly from a distance. According to Jared's later accounts, his father did not seem the least bit alarmed or suspicious. After chatting for several minutes, Lenny briefly returned inside the house. He informed his son that the visitor was highly interested in viewing one of his prized stud horses. Lenny explained he planned to accompany the mysterious man on a trip. They were heading first to Elk City, Oklahoma. Afterward, they planned to cross state lines into Mobeetie, Texas, to inspect more horses. Lenny casually promised he would return to the farm by that same afternoon. He then departed the property, riding as a passenger alongside the stranger. They traveled in the man's white 1994 Ford F-150 pickup truck. This specific vehicle reportedly displayed New Mexico license plates. It also featured a highly distinctive yellow tag mounted on the front bumper. Jared stood and watched his father drive away down the dirt road. The teenager never imagined it would be the absolute last time he would ever see his dad alive. Later that exact same morning, approximately 2 full hours after Lenny had vanished down the driveway, a possible sighting was formally reported. A waitress working a shift at a local diner, situated just a few short miles away from the Derrickson property, contacted authorities. She claimed she observed Lenny sharing a breakfast meal with an unknown male companion. She specifically noted that the unidentified man commanded the vast majority of the conversation. Lenny, meanwhile, simply sat quietly, nursing a cup of black coffee and listening intently. The physical description of this talkative companion perfectly matched the stranger who had previously arrived at the farm. Lenny's immediate family, however, heavily doubted the credibility of the specific diner sighting. They pointed out that he had already consumed a full breakfast at home before the stranger arrived. They rigidly insisted he was not the type of man to eat a second breakfast in a single morning. I think about this logically, however. If a potential business associate requests a quick stop at a diner, accommodating them is simply good manners. Furthermore, according to the waitress's own statement, Lenny was merely drinking coffee. He was not actually consuming a massive second meal. This small detail perfectly aligns with the family's knowledge of his eating habits. Investigating detectives themselves remained deeply unsure if the quiet patron was truly Lenny Derrickson. It could have easily been a simple case of mistaken identity. Aside from this single unconfirmed report, absolutely no one else could recall seeing Lenny at any point on the day of his sudden disappearance. As soon as the realization hit that Lenny was truly missing, local authorities immediately launched a massive search effort. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation quickly joined the hunt. Detectives thoroughly swept the Derrickson property. They quickly discovered that Lenny had never actually arrived at the specific barn where his stud horses were securely kept. An exhaustive, meticulous investigation spanned the following days and stretched into weeks. The results were incredibly bleak. Police found absolutely no signs of a violent struggle. Zero physical evidence pointing toward foul play was uncovered. And, most distressingly, no body was ever located. Law enforcement possessed incredibly little information to build a cohesive case. They were forced to rely almost entirely upon the initial account provided by young Jared, along with the vague description of the unknown horse buyer. Naturally, this mysterious stranger instantly became the absolute central focus of the entire investigation. He was, after all, the last documented person seen in Lenny's company. A professional composite sketch of the suspect was carefully developed. It relied heavily on visual descriptions provided by both Jared and the local diner waitress. The resulting sketch detailed a white male. He stood approximately 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighed roughly 210 pounds. His face featured a full, thick, reddish-brown beard. He was last seen wearing a black baseball cap, prominently displaying a No Fear logo. Despite massive public distribution of this sketch, the man has never been located. He has never been questioned by authorities. He officially remains simply a person of interest rather than a formally charged suspect. 6 long months following Lenny's baffling disappearance, the calendar turned to September 1998. A totally unexpected telephone call suddenly injected a tantalizing yet ultimately frustrating lead into the cold case. An anonymous male caller frantically contacted local police from a crowded bar situated in Amarillo, Texas. The man urgently claimed that the missing Lenny Derrickson was currently sitting inside that very establishment. The anonymous tipster provided a highly detailed physical description of the patron he believed was Lenny. Making the situation infinitely stranger, this patron was allegedly loudly boasting to other customers that he personally knew Lenny Derrickson. The frantic caller absolutely refused to provide his own identity to the dispatcher. He did, however, promise he would patiently wait at the bar until uniformed officers arrived on the scene. Police units immediately rushed to the remote Amarillo location. By the time they finally breached the doors, the trail was entirely cold. Both the anonymous tipster and the man he had confidently identified as Lenny were completely gone. The very next morning, a bartender who had worked the previous shift partially corroborated the bizarre story. The employee distinctly remembered the highly enthusiastic caller loudly proclaiming that Lenny was sitting in the bar. Investigating detectives found absolutely no logical reason to disbelieve the caller's incredible account. The bartender's supporting narrative added heavy credibility to the claim. Despite being an incredibly encouraging lead, it rapidly slammed into a total dead end. Neither Lenny nor the elusive anonymous caller could ever be tracked down for official verification. Law enforcement agencies doggedly continued to chase down various other scattered leads and anonymous tips over the ensuing years. Tragically, every single one ultimately fizzled out into nothingness. Over the intervening decades, several distinct theories have naturally emerged in an attempt to logically explain what exactly happened to Lenny Derrickson. One prominent theory suggests Lenny voluntarily abandoned his old world to secretly start a brand new life. Police investigators carefully note that without a body or a crime scene, they simply cannot rule this out. When I started looking into the life of Kurt McFall, I learned he entered the world on December 9, 1966. His birthplace was San Diego, California. Raised primarily within a quiet suburban environment, Kurt gained a reputation as a highly intelligent student at Clayton Valley High School. He was well liked by his peers. Acquaintances frequently described his personality as remarkably confident and, deeply caring. He eagerly participated in various extracurricular pursuits, dedicating his time to both the school newspaper and the official yearbook club. Academic subjects like advanced mathematics and complex sciences heavily occupied his interests. Beyond the traditional classroom setting, Kurt possessed a profound love for the great outdoors. He enthusiastically engaged in intense recreational activities. Swimming and scaling steep cliffs were among his favorite pastimes. A budding early fascination with the tabletop game Dungeons & Dragons eventually steered him toward joining the Society for Creative Anachronism. This specific organization was completely dedicated to the meticulous revival of medieval European customs. On Saturday, September 8, 1984, Kurt departed his family residence located in Concord, California. He steered his vehicle across the expanse of the Bay Bridge, heading directly into San Francisco. His stated itinerary involved spending the evening with a close acquaintance. He intended to drive back home by Sunday evening. The exact sequence of events that unfolded that dark night, however, remains shrouded in absolute uncertainty. Accounts provided by individuals intimately close to the teenager suggested Kurt had become increasingly entangled in a subculture, drastically removed from his conventional suburban upbringing. In addition to his active participation in the society, a strong interest in the occult had seemingly taken root. He allegedly joined a secluded group fundamentally focused on pagan religious practices. Long after the tragedy, a former high school companion disclosed a disturbing conversation. Kurt had reportedly spoken about his direct involvement with a satanic cult that actively experimented with dark magic. This confidant explained how Kurt felt hopelessly trapped by the organization's grip. He supposedly feared for his own physical safety if he ever attempted to permanently sever ties. Exactly 2 days following his unexplained disappearance, the calendar read Monday, September 10th, 1984. Two amateur birdwatchers were quietly exploring the rugged, treacherous cliffs situated at Land's End in San Francisco Bay. They stumbled upon a truly grim discovery. Lying on a remote, rocky beach far below the towering cliffs rested the bruised, half-naked remains of Kurt McFall. Essential articles of clothing were mysteriously absent from the body. He lacked a shirt. No shoes were found. His socks were entirely missing. The physical remains displayed multiple traumatic injuries, coupled with evidence of massive blood loss. The specific condition of the teenager's body deeply puzzled medical examiners. Despite the severe trauma clearly present, only minor surface abrasions were documented on various parts of his skin. Toxicology reports confirmed there was absolutely zero sign of illicit substances or alcohol in his biological system. Scattered around Kurt's abandoned vehicle were numerous empty beer bottles. This car was located, parked on a nearby golf course that provided a sweeping overlook of the Pacific Ocean. Investigating officers systematically noted several other highly unusual details present at the scene. Kurt's official driver's license was discovered resting on the floorboard. The keys to the vehicle had been casually discarded directly on the driver's seat. Perhaps most remarkably, an expensive, prized suit of armor, a piece he had specifically purchased for his medieval reenactment activities, was missing from the car's trunk. The presiding San Francisco coroner officially determined that the cause of death stemmed from multiple traumatic injuries and severe blood loss. The formal autopsy report did suggest the sustained injuries were largely consistent with a catastrophic fall from a great height. It carefully noted, however, that the precise mechanism causing those injuries could never be conclusively proven. Initial theories proposed by law enforcement suggested the fatality was simply a probable accident resulting from a late-night cliff-climbing excursion. Later on, the coroner himself went on record to remark that an intentional, malicious act remained a highly plausible cause. Despite this professional opinion, insufficient physical evidence existed to pursue any formal criminal charges. Consequently, the official manner of death was classified as strictly unknown. The case was left entirely unresolved. I noticed that one of the most intensely debated aspects surrounding this entire mystery involves a man named Gabriel Carrillo. This individual utilized the Welsh moniker Caradoc while serving in his capacity as a respected leader within a local neo-pagan group. Carrillo openly acknowledged befriending young Kurt. He permitted the teenager to spend nights resting at his private apartment. Regarding the specific night the death occurred, Carrillo recounted that Kurt had previously gone swimming in the frigid waters of Ocean Beach. Later on, at approximately 3 a.m., Kurt allegedly knocked on Carrillo's door. The teenager supposedly announced his immediate intention to return to the dark beach. Carrillo publicly theorized that Kurt might have simply taken far too many foolish risks during that turbulent night. Perhaps he slipped on the damp rocks, or maybe a powerful undertow dragged him out to sea. Carrillo rigidly maintained that the tragedy was nothing more than a horrible accident. Kurt's grieving father, along with several close companions, remained deeply suspicious of this specific narrative. As the decades have slowly passed, various distinct theories have been actively circulated to rationalize the mysterious demise of Kurt McFall. The primary theory remains the most straightforward. It suggests he suffered fatal injuries strictly due to an accidental plunge. The cliffs at Land's End are notoriously treacherous. It remains entirely within the realm of logic that Kurt lost his footing while navigating the rocky terrain or attempting to enter the crashing surf. Proponents of this accidental theory heavily emphasize the complete lack of defensive wounds or trauma indicative of a physical altercation. An alternative, darker theory insists Kurt was deliberately pushed over the precipice. This implies direct foul play. This specific viewpoint has been heavily championed by the victim's father, Tom McFall. Tom held the steadfast belief that his son did not simply perish by sheer accident. He frequently argued that Kurt was an experienced climber, vastly more adept at safely traversing dangerous cliff environments. A core element to consider regarding this perspective is the sheer danger of the environment. Scaling jagged cliffs in the pitch black of night is extremely hazardous. Doing so during dark, stormy weather conditions exponentially increases the risk of a fatal error. Tom McFall also pointed toward the peculiar staging discovered near the abandoned vehicle. The sudden appearance of beer bottles and the baffling theft of the heavy armor suit indicated, to him, a deliberate tampering of the scene. I have to point out an essential fact often overlooked in the case files regarding those empty beer bottles. Family members and close acquaintances unanimously confirmed that Kurt absolutely did not consume alcohol. While a grieving parent's defense of a child's habits might sometimes be viewed with mild skepticism, the fact that his entire peer group completely corroborated this detail is undeniably a major point of interest. A third distinct explanation proposes the crime scene was systematically altered long after Kurt was already deceased. According to widespread discussions hosted on various true crime forums, some individuals theorized that local vagrants wandered by the area, or perhaps opportunistic scavengers stumbled upon the unlocked abandoned vehicle. These unknown parties might have unknowingly tampered with the surrounding scene. Proponents of this theory suggest the empty beer bottles, along with other discarded items, were simply left behind by these random passersby. They were not components of a sprawling occult conspiracy. This specific hypothesis attempts to bridge the gap between the accidental fall scenario and the bizarre clues found near the golf course. It argues the environment was unintentionally contaminated by completely unrelated individuals. Kurt's tragic case originally captured massive public attention primarily because it unfolded during the absolute peak of the 1980s satanic panic. Media outlets frequently presented the mystery in a wildly sensationalist manner. They constantly attempted to forcibly tie his unfortunate death into the broader, hysterical narratives dominating the evening news broadcasts at that time. The most plausible explanation, according to an objective review of the available evidence, points toward a tragic accident. The official autopsy revealed absolutely no signs of intoxicating substances. A horrific fall from the precarious, crumbling cliffs of Land's End seems to be a case of terrible misfortune rather than a calculated, deliberate homicide. Occult theories certainly offer a tempting cinematic narrative. The simplest explanation, however, frequently proves to be the most accurate. In this specific instance, an accidental plunge appears to be the most logical, reality-based scenario. Gabriel Carrillo was aggressively portrayed as a malicious Satanist by the press during that era. Deeper historical research, however, reveals he was actually a practicing Wiccan. His primary focus centered heavily on ancient Celtic traditions. Numerous historical accounts from individuals who personally knew him as Caradoc describe a different man entirely. These sources consistently report he was deeply invested in practicing white magic. He focused on manifesting positive, benevolent energy within the world. When examined through this grounded lens, his activities sound way less sinister. Media sensationalism, thoroughly intertwined with the overbearing overlay of the satanic panic, undoubtedly manipulated public perception of this enduring mystery. I want to shift my focus now to February 14, 1975. A couple driving down a rural farm road in Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana, discovered a truly tragic scene. They found a young man hanging from a tree. As I read through the original reports, the victim appeared to be a white male teenager. He was around 16 to 18 years old, with brown hair and eyes. At the base of the tree, investigators found a sealed glass jar. Inside the jar was a lengthy note addressed simply to Mom and Dad. In this letter, the teen expressed deep gratitude to his parents. He thanked them for giving him excellent advantages and privileges. However, he confessed to feeling like a false and empty vessel who never developed into a real person. He described a deep lifelong depression and a sense of detachment from life. The note even cited sociologist Emil Durkheim's writings on ending oneself. This specific detail really showed the boy's intellectual bent. In a very sad postscript, he implored authorities not to investigate his identity. He stated that chasing his name would only shatter his parents' peace. To quote the teenager directly, "Do not deprive them of the hope that their missing son will return. Simply cremate me as John Doe." This extremely unusual request set the tone for the entire mystery to come. Police found no identification with the body. They only recovered a comb and a laundry marker in his clothing. Investigators in 1975 made extensive efforts to learn his exact name. They took the boy's fingerprints and circulated them to police forces nationwide. No match ever turned up. The case received national media coverage. Over 300 parents of missing sons contacted the Plaquemines Parish Sheriff's Office or came in person to view the body. I find it heartbreaking that after a 4-month campaign failed to identify him, the police ended up closing their file. Tragically, no official case files remain today. The young man was ultimately interred in an unmarked grave in Gretna, Louisiana. Modern forensic efforts have been severely hampered by the complete lack of dental records or DNA samples. Because he was buried in an unmarked grave and the case file was lost, no one is entirely certain where he rests. Even if the case file hadn't been lost, I highly doubt it would have recorded the exact physical location of his burial. The circumstances in the eloquent note prompt many theories about what led this young person to take such a permanent action. I've read speculation that he might have been consumed by guilt for what he perceived as a serious personal wrongdoing. He may have been essentially punishing himself. Others believe he could have been struggling with his identity in an unaccepting era. This inner conflict could have contributed to his deep despair. Beyond motive, a major question remains. Who was this young man? Because no local missing person matched his description, internet sleuths have looked much farther afield. One popular theory is that this John Doe might have been Bayard William Cousins. He was a 22-year-old from Virginia. Cousins disappeared in early February 1975. He left his family a note telling them not to worry about him. Cousins was tall and slender, with very dark brown hair and a deep interest in philosophy. These details are strikingly similar to the Plaquemines victim. However, I must point out a few things. Cousins wore glasses, and none were found with the John Doe. He was also substantially older than the estimated age of the deceased. The difference between the lowest age estimate for the John Doe and cousin's actual age is 6 full years. Those years between 16 and 22 are developmentally quite different. Cousins had a very distinctive cross-shaped scar on one of his fingers. The investigating police never noted this mark. Because the case file was lost, it may well be that initial investigators already ruled out Cousins. After all, they interviewed approximately 300 parents. Given that Bayard went missing around the same time the doe was discovered, his parents may have been among those 300 interviewed. News didn't travel with modern speed back then, but this story absolutely made national headlines. Parents of missing children at the time likely glued themselves to news updates as much as possible in 1975. People who believe this theory suggest Bayard may have traveled over 1,000 miles to Louisiana to end his life anonymously. This aligns directly with the doe's expressed wish to spare his parents the pain of discovering his body. He wanted to keep their false hope of a positive resolution alive. This idea remains completely unconfirmed. Internet sleuths work with even more incomplete datasets than official authorities do. I want you to picture being out late at night. You are standing alone after a gathering in the city. The air is freezing cold. The streets are completely deserted. Getting home as rapidly as possible becomes your only priority. So you open the Uber application and request a ride. After a brief wait of 1 or 2 minutes, a driver officially accepts the request. And then, well, a truly unsettling image appears on your screen to reveal the person coming to pick you up. I remember reading about how back in the year 2016, Chinese social media became absolutely inundated with screenshots from users of Uber China. They all reported the exact same bizarre occurrence after requesting a ride. Instead of viewing a standard profile picture of an average driver, passengers found themselves matched with someone resembling a corpse. These profiles featured hollow eyes, a completely vacant expression. Some displayed facial features that were unnaturally stretched out, while others looked like horrors dragged directly from the uncanny valley. Or, I suppose, a catalog of botched plastic surgeries. Images spread across the Weibo platform at an incredible speed. Users naturally wondered if the network had suffered a massive hacking event, or maybe some software glitch caused these grotesque distortions. A faction of the public began to claim these drivers were subjects of a coordinated psychological experiment, one supposedly orchestrated by the government itself. Others genuinely believed they were dealing with paranormal entities that had never actually walked the earth. The media eventually branded these strange accounts as ghost drivers. When I dug into the actual reality of the situation, it turned out to be decidedly less dramatic, yet I found it a lot more fascinating. At that specific time, the company enforced a cancellation policy, where passengers terminating a ride after a short grace period were charged a minor penalty fee. This money went directly into the driver's pocket. Individually, the cost was merely a few yuan, that is, barely enough currency to purchase a standard bottle of water. Drivers operating across the entire country, however, recognized the system as an easy opportunity to essentially print money. All a driver had to do was accept an incoming ride request and somehow persuade the waiting passenger to cancel the trip. What better method to force a cancellation than by introducing oneself as a possessed mannequin? I can see why the scammers banked on a very specific reaction. Customers would open the app. They would see a haunted waxwork assigned to collect them. The passenger would then decide they wanted absolutely no involvement with that particular journey and immediately hit cancel. This psychological tactic proved surprisingly effective. It worked particularly well against individuals traveling alone during the late hours of the night. These fraudulent drivers did not need to physically show up at any location. They never had to interact with the passenger. They simply collected the cancellation penalty and patiently waited for the next victim. Over the duration of a single night, those admittedly tiny fees accumulated into a massive payout. But what happened if a passenger was not adequately frightened into canceling the ride? Well, the scammers possessed another clever trick. Following the acceptance of a ride request, multiple victims reported observing their designated vehicle moving on the in-app map. It would appear to steadily approach their exact location. Suddenly, the digital car would drive straight past the passenger without ever slowing down. Mere moments later, the trip would be officially marked as completed. Alternatively, the driver would cancel the trip themselves after submitting a false claim that the customer was absent from the agreed meeting point. Other frustrated users described watching the GPS icon remain completely stationary for extended durations. Then it would abruptly jump all the way across the city. In certain extreme cases, I read that the driver's geographical location appeared to shoot directly through solid buildings, ultimately ending up floating in the dead center of a lake. A few customers grew legitimately spooked by these impossible movements. Some jumped straight to paranormal conclusions. Actually, this erratic tracking was merely a symptom of location spoofing software being utilized to artificially simulate movement. Once again, providing legitimate transport was never the objective. Triggering the payment system to extract another small fee was the sole goal. A handful of chilling reports even emerged from users who alleged their ghost driver successfully picked them up. The driver then supposedly transported them to a remote, desolate area and forcibly evicted them from the vehicle. This was allegedly exacted as vengeance because the passenger refused to cancel the ride, thereby wasting the scammer's valuable time. Due to the massive scale of this fraudulent enterprise and the striking similarities found between the fake profiles, widespread suspicion pointed toward a shady, organized syndicate. Consensus leaned heavily away from independent individuals acting alone. Because of the intense online scrutiny surrounding this scam, the company was forced to take decisive action. The corporation publicly stated it had adopted zero-tolerance policy against exploitative behavior. Affected passengers were promised full refunds. The company eventually purged thousands of fraudulent accounts from its system. New facial recognition protocols were implemented to randomly identify active drivers. The timing of this crisis, however, could not have been worse. Just a few short weeks before the ghost driver phenomenon breached the mainstream consciousness, Uber had formally agreed to sell its Chinese operations. The buyer was its most formidable rival, Didi Chuxing. This sale concluded an extraordinarily expensive, protracted battle for dominance over the country's ride-hailing market. Reports of these terrifying ghost drivers merely reinforced lingering public anxieties regarding the platform's overall safety during a highly turbulent corporate transition. Years down the line, this bizarre chapter of internet history would eventually reach Western audiences through viral TikTok videos. Next, I want to talk about a much more recent case that I've been reviewing. On December 13th, 2020, around 10:55 at night, Jason Landry left his apartment in San Marcos, Texas, intended to drive to his parents' home near Houston. By 11:24 that night, Landry reached the town of Luling. His phone data shows he stopped using Waze, a turn-by-turn navigation app. He then opened Snapchat, a popular multimedia messaging application. Instead of staying on the main highway, he continued straight through town onto a quiet rural path known as Salt Flat Road. Sometime around midnight, investigators believe Landry's vehicle veered off the gravel road and crashed. In the early morning hours of December 14th, around 12, a passing volunteer firefighter discovered Landry's Nissan Altima wrecked along Salt Flat Road. The car's headlights were still on, and the keys remained right in the ignition. Jason was nowhere to be found. I reviewed the scene descriptions, which show his clothes, backpack, cell phone, and other personal belongings strewn around the crash site. There was no physical sign of him in the immediate area. One theory holds that Jason was injured or disoriented from the impact and wandered off on foot. The night was cold. If he was in shock or under the influence, he may have become confused and removed his clothing. This paradoxical behavior sometimes occurs in severe hypothermia cases. Searchers found only a tiny drop of blood at the scene and no indication of a physical struggle. It appears he survived the wreck with minor injuries and left the vehicle on his own. In this scenario, Landry might have gotten lost in the darkness and ultimately succumbed to the harsh elements. Some people speculate he may have been under the influence and actively fleeing from the crash site when he became lost. Another theory suggests that, despite a lack of evidence pointing to major physical injuries, he could have suffered a traumatic brain injury in the accident. This could have caused him to act disoriented, exhibit out-of-character behavior, and wander away from the scene. A third theory suggests third-party involvement in Jason's disappearance. Search dogs tracked Jason's scent from the crash site back toward Luling for about a quarter mile. Then the trail suddenly vanished. This clue raises the possibility that he got a ride or was picked up by an unknown individual at that spot. No direct physical evidence currently supports this exact scenario. Law enforcement launched an extensive search immediately after Jason's car was found. Caldwell County authorities and volunteer search teams scoured the surrounding terrain with tracking dogs. They found no trace of Landry beyond the belongings left at the crash site and that brief scent track. Investigators thoroughly analyzed the physical evidence. Examination of the wreck indicated a single-car accident with no sign of another vehicle involved. As I look at the calendar now in February 2025, Jason Landry remains missing, and his case continues to perplex investigators. I will never forget hearing about the morning of August 9th, 2018. It brought a devastating tragedy to a family. 63-year-old Susan Rainwater was quietly cycling alone. She traveled along an isolated stretch of road winding through rural Washington state. The location was roughly 60 miles straight south of the city of Seattle. Without warning, she was violently struck and subsequently killed by a speeding vehicle. The driver of the automobile never bothered to apply the brakes. They never stopped to check on the victim. They certainly never contacted emergency services to report the fatal collision. Several long hours would pass before a random passerby finally noticed Susan's mangled bicycle, discarded in a muddy ditch. Her lifeless body was eventually discovered, lying hundreds of feet away from the initial point of impact. Investigating officers initially possessed remarkably little physical evidence to build a case. Absolutely no eyewitnesses were present to observe the fleeing driver's face or record a license plate number. Useful CCTV footage was entirely non-existent in that remote rural area. The sole piece of physical evidence abandoned at the violent crime scene consisted of a single object. It was a jagged slab of black plastic. The fragment was roughly the size of a standard smartphone. The piece had violently snapped off the suspect's vehicle during the exact moment they collided with Susan. Lacking any immediate actionable leads, Washington State Patrol Trooper Jonah Baptiste made a highly unconventional decision. She opted to crowdsource the complex detective work. She carefully photographed the jagged plastic fragment. The image was subsequently uploaded to the internet, accompanied by a public plea asking if anyone could possibly identify its origin. By August 10th, the digital photograph found its way onto a specific subsection of Reddit known as "What is this thing?" This particular digital forum is dedicated to users submitting images of mysterious objects for the community to collectively identify. The post rapidly accumulated massive attention. Hundreds of eager users quickly flooded the comments section to offer their own personal suggestions. The vast majority of these replies amounted to little more than moderately educated guesses. I read through some of the responses. One user theorized it resembled a piece of standard trim found on the bottom rocker beneath a car door. Another assumed the fragment originated from the front end of a vehicle, guessing it was part of a bumper assembly located near a headlight wiper. A different commenter suggested it merely looked like cheap, gray plastic painted black. They thought it perhaps served as a decorative license plate holder or similar cosmetic junk. Eventually, a respectable handful of users correctly identified the damaged chunk as originating from a vehicle's headlight bezel. Very few, however, were able to provide any concrete specifics. That is, until one particular user entered the chat. Operating under the crude username Jeff's Nuts, this individual firmly claimed the broken fragment was definitively part of a headlamp bezel. He traced it to a late 1980s Chevrolet pickup truck. More specifically, he confidently identified the part as belonging to a 1988 Chevrolet Silverado. To validate his incredibly precise claim, he uploaded detailed comparison photographs. These images clearly highlighted a small, highly distinctive notch molded directly into the plastic structure. A notch he insisted was entirely unique to that specific automotive design. I mean, the public desperately wanted to comprehend how anyone could possibly identify the exact make, specific model, and approximate manufacturing year of a fleeing vehicle from such a generic, ordinary-looking piece of broken plastic. According to his own explanation, Jeff had previously enjoyed a career working as an official state vehicle inspector operating in Maryland. A major component of his daily responsibilities involved executing mandatory headlamp inspections and precise alignments. Consequently, he had spent countless grueling hours staring directly at this exact mechanical part attached to these exact trucks. Having examined the identical component day after day for several consecutive years, he did not even have to consciously analyze the plastic fragment in the photograph. He simply recognized its shape on pure instinct. The exact right person, possessing the precise niche expertise required for this impossible task, just so happened to be casually scrolling through the website at the exact perfect moment, right? Law enforcement investigators desperately wanted to apprehend the perpetrator before they had adequate time to hide their tracks or repair their damaged vehicle. They took Jeff's online post extremely serious. Instead of hopelessly searching for virtually any damaged vehicle scattered across the entire Pacific Northwest region, they dramatically narrowed their focus. They concentrated their search efforts on a much smaller pool of late 1980s Chevrolet pickup trucks. When combined with an anonymous tip received by authorities shortly afterward, Jeff's lead ultimately helped detectives successfully locate the hidden vehicle. They quickly moved to arrest the primary suspect. A man named Jeremy Thomas Simon was taken into police custody. During interrogation, Simon offered a hollow explanation. He claimed that on the tragic morning of the incident, he had simply fallen asleep while behind the steering wheel. He stated he genuinely believed he had merely struck a roadside mailbox. He admitted to fleeing the scene only after noticing the twisted wreckage of the bicycle. According to his official statement, he fled because he did not want to see a dead body. In January of the year 2019, Simon officially pleaded guilty to charges of vehicular homicide. Additional charges included hit and run, alongside the illegal possession of heroin. The actual reason behind his sudden bout of exhaustion behind the wheel was no longer a mystery. As a direct result of a negotiated plea agreement, a judge sentenced him to just 4.5 years in the system. Half of this mandated time was to be served inside a state prison facility. The remaining half was to be completed on supervised probation. Virtually overnight, the user known as Jeff became a certified internet legend. Global news outlets eagerly reported the sensational story that an online forum had successfully solved a fatal hit and run. Far more important to Jeff than accumulating meaningless internet karma, however, was a much deeper realization. He had directly assisted Susan's grieving family in finding some small semblance of actual justice and closure. In a subsequent interview provided to the media, he admitted he did not fully comprehend the immense seriousness of his contribution until several hours after publishing the initial post. He explained that it was not until he read a private message sent from a friend of the deceased that reality set in. The message detailed exactly how utterly distraught the victim's family was. They profusely thanked him for his invaluable assistance. Only then did he realize the real-world impact of his digital actions. A human being was dead. The perpetrator would have likely evaded justice entirely. The sheer randomness of someone posting the link, combined with his presence online at that exact millisecond, completely changed the course of the investigation. It is remarkably easy to dismiss obscure, hyper-specific knowledge as nothing more than useless trivia, the type of information you might occasionally pull out at a local pub quiz night to impress friends. Yet, every so often, a person's oddly specific life experience turns out to be exactly the key an impossible investigation desperately requires. Finally, might I tell you about a case from 1989 that really caught my attention. 23-year-old Adam Hecht, the son of a prominent Hollywood film producer, mysteriously vanished from Beverly Hills. He was last seen on June 7, 1989. He drove away from his home in a rented car while his personal vehicle was undergoing repairs in a local shop. Adam Hecht grew up in a wealthy Beverly Hills family with very close ties to Hollywood royalty. His father, Harold Hecht, was a highly acclaimed movie producer. His filmography stands as a major legacy in cinema history. Adam, then in his early 20s, worked as a tennis instructor. In early 1989, Adam befriended a homeless man known only as Tony. Adam shocked his family by inviting Tony to live inside his apartment. Adam had grown deeply disillusioned with his privileged lifestyle. Under Tony's influence, he developed a growing interest in meditation and mysticism. Soon, Adam was spending nights among the local homeless population. This brought immediate shock and deep concern to his wealthy friends and family. By June 1989, Adam's loved ones were growing increasingly worried. On June 7th, he drove off in a rental car and never returned. After several days with zero contact, his family reported him missing to the Beverly Hills Police Department. When Adam's brother went to check the apartment, Tony was there alone. He could offer no explanation for Adam's whereabouts. Police questioned Tony. He insisted he knew nothing about what had happened. He simply maintained that Adam was nowhere to be found. A few weeks later, police discovered Adam's rental car abandoned on a Beverly Hills street. It had accumulated multiple parking tickets on the windshield. The keys remained right in the ignition. Inside sat Adam's wallet, driver's license, cash, and credit cards. There was not a single clue regarding his ultimate fate. Searchers have never found any further trace of Adam, despite extensive efforts. With no physical evidence pointing to a violent crime, police could only treat the case as a missing person matter rather than a homicide. Adam's family insisted he would never leave voluntarily. His brother emphasized that vanishing without a word was completely out of character for him. With no solid leads to follow, the case eventually went cold. It officially remains open today, pending any new information. I've read two main theories regarding what happened to Adam Hecht. One theory suggests he left voluntarily to start a completely new life. Disillusioned with his privileged upbringing, Adam may have deliberately vanished to live among the homeless population. He might have wanted to pursue a deeper spiritual path. His keen interest in meditation and his willingness to abandon a wallet filled with cash lend credence to this idea. People studying the case suggest that leaving his keys in the ignition and his wallet untouched served as a conscious symbolic gesture. He was shedding his life of easy material wealth. Even police acknowledged the other possibility that Adam simply decided never to return. The other theory proposes that Adam met with foul play. His family suspects that Tony or another individual may have harmed him. Tony's odd behavior and a cryptic remark he made later fueled this suspicion. Roughly 1 year after the disappearance, one of Adam's family members encountered Tony. They asked directly if he knew anything. Tony replied that if the family member stayed on the streets long enough, he would find out what happened to Adam. Some interpreted this statement to mean that Adam was slain by someone among the homeless community he had joined. Others believe it indicated that Adam was alive and well, living on the streets and completely rejecting his privileged past. Without contact or new evidence for decades, determining Adam's exact fate remains elusive. Observers and investigators consider foul play a strong possibility, given his sudden disappearance. No physical proof supports a fatal outcome, though. It remains possible that he suffered a mental break or entered a dissociative fugue state, leaving his past behind permanently. Okay, guys, I just woken up and saw we're still in a war with Iran, and that Lindsey Graham died. World is crazy, so I'm here to make it more depressing. I'm kidding. This episode will feature few of the mysteries I found yesterday and that really disturbed me. So, yeah, stay a while. When Catherine Ackling Bryan didn't show up to pick up her 2 daughters from school, her husband Michael panicked. Within 30 minutes, he called the police to report her missing. Michael soon found out that Catherine had been acting strange all morning. She was completely frazzled when she dropped the girls off. Her younger daughter was actually still in her pajamas, something she had never done before. It turned out the little girl had been sick the day before. At first, Catherine planned to keep her home, but changed her mind at the last second. After dropping them off, Catherine came back home around 10 in the morning. She later brought some items to the school before taking a bus to the shopping center. Security cameras at the St. Mary Village Center caught her visiting a Target, where she bought fresh clothes for the girls. At 12:17 p.m., she walked out of the mall. What happened after she left is a mystery. No other footage of her exists. I believe she made it back home, though, because those new clothes were sitting neatly inside the house, and she had already started a family meal in the slow cooker. By 3:30, she was gone without a trace. When the school first called Michael, he thought it was a mistake and figured she was just asleep. But when he checked the house, it was empty. Her phone and purse were on the kitchen counter, but her house keys were gone. The police started a massive search. Over the next year, the family and authorities made desperate appeals for help. But no more footage turned up, and no witnesses came forward. The police don't actually suspect foul play. Catherine had a history of mental health struggles and was dealing with a lot of stress from her daughter's illness. During the walk to school that morning, the kids noticed tears in her eyes. Her family deeply believes she is no longer alive, even though her body has never been found. It leaves the whole thing completely unresolved. For well over a month, Matthew Dillon's family and friends have been looking for answers. He vanished on January 2nd, 2023, and it completely tore their world apart. Then things took a strange turn. CCTV cameras caught Matthew walking around in York, a city over 100 miles away from his home in South Liverpool. Matthew is 46 years old. He lived with his dad in Mossley Hill, Liverpool, which is where he was last seen leaving the house. It was a freezing morning, completely ordinary. His dad asked him what he was up to, and Matthew just said it was a nice day out and that he might head down to Southport. That's about a 90-minute trip on public transit. Later that afternoon, Matthew texted his dad on WhatsApp. He said he'd be home around 10:30 at night if the bus was on time. His dad texted back, telling him to take care. The app showed Matthew read that message at 10:29 p.m. It felt like he was almost through the door, but 20 minutes passed and he never showed up. His dad sent another text at 10:50, but it didn't even go through. Matthew either shut his phone off or lost his signal completely. When he didn't come home, his family called the police right away. Early on, everyone looked around Liverpool and Southport. People shared his face all over social media, begging for information. Nothing turned up in either place. Then the news came in that someone saw Matthew in York. People claimed they spotted him sitting in a local pub, a place he used to visit. It makes no sense to me that he'd take off on a huge trip like that without telling a soul. Going from Southport to York is a 3-hour journey, and he would have had to travel right back through Liverpool to get there. Witnesses saw him in York on January 3rd and 4th. They said he looked calm, not acting strange or erratic at all. The last time anyone officially saw him was the morning of January 5th. A security camera caught him at the York train station. He was wearing the exact same clothes he left Liverpool in 3 days straight before: a heavy blue jacket, a dark winter beanie, and a simple messenger bag. Matthew is a white man with a large build, short sandy hair, and he wears glasses. Let me tell you about a bizarre mystery from May 2004, out on the streets of Monaco. The Jaguar Formula One team did something wild. They mounted a massive, incredibly valuable diamond right onto the nose cone of their race car. It was all a marketing stunt for the Monaco Grand Prix, but a sudden crash sent that jewel flying into the dirt, starting a mystery that has lasted over 20 years. The whole idea came from a big corporate sponsorship deal. Jaguar's team was feeling the pressure to get more eyes on their brand and keep their sponsors happy, so they set up a deal to promote the Hollywood movie Ocean's 12 during the race. Monaco is famous for glamour and celebrities, so it seemed like the perfect spot for a stunt that would go viral. Jaguar worked with a diamond company that supplied flawless diamonds for the weekend. Each Jaguar car had one of these gems stuck right on the nose cone. These weren't cheap glass replicas or movie props. They were real, perfect diamonds worth about $250,000 back then. The marketing team wanted the risk to be real. Having a fortune strapped to the front of a car moving at insane speeds was supposed to bring extra excitement to the movie promo. Of course, no insurance company on Earth would touch a stunt like that. Jaguar openly admitted that losing the diamond was a risk they were willing to take. With the world watching, they were either going to look like geniuses or corporate fools. On Sunday, May 23, 2004, the race started. After a few messy start attempts, Christian Klein took off near the back. He was just a young rookie driver for Jaguar back then. Within the first minute, everything went wrong. Klein tangled with Nick Heidfeld's Jordan car. The contact smashed Klein's front wing, trapping the debris under his wheels so he couldn't steer or brake. At that point, he was just a passenger, flying straight into the tire wall, nose first. That was the end of his race, right on lap 1. The nose cone with the diamond was buried deep in the tires. Marshals moved in quickly under the yellow flags to get the car off the track. Klein walked away fine, but the $250,000 diamond was in trouble. The Jaguar team went into a total panic, and honestly, they weren't just worried about their driver. One manager later admitted his immediate thought went straight to the diamond, not Klein, which is wild to say out loud. Safety rules meant the team couldn't run out to the track during the race. A crane lifted the wrecked car away while the rest of the drivers kept racing past. The team had to wait 2 hours for the Grand Prix to finish before they could look at the car. When they finally got to it, the diamond was gone. It had been glued tight into the carbon fiber before the race, but it completely vanished during the crash or the cleanup. The news went everywhere, turning their marketing stunt into a massive drama. People standing near the crash site even started searching the dirt, hoping to find a fortune. A few theories popped up about what happened. The simplest explanation is that the diamond just smashed to pieces or got lost in the dirt. No crime, just bad luck. Hitting a tire wall at that speed could easily dislodge the stone and throw it somewhere hidden. It could have easily been missed in the wrecked carbon fiber and swept away into the trash when they cleaned the track. But the most popular theory is a lot darker, and it's exactly what Jaguar's management suspected. Someone at the scene saw the diamond and pocketed it. A Formula One crash draws a lot of eyes, and the Monaco track puts fans and marshals right next to the action. When Klein crashed, pieces of the car flew everywhere. A quick-thinking marshal or a fan could have spotted the sparkler and grabbed it before anyone noticed. With that kind of value, whoever found it had every reason to keep quiet and sell it later down the road. There were hundreds of people right there, and anyone could have slipped a tiny gem into their pocket away from the cameras. Even so, nobody ever confessed and the jewel never turned up. The theft theory is still just a theory, but racing fans love talking about it. There's another angle people discuss, implying some inside planning. This theory says Jaguar wasn't actually that reckless. Since they couldn't get insurance, maybe they quietly swapped the real diamond for a cheap fake. A fake stone would have shattered into dust during the impact. Some people also wonder why race officials even allowed a hard projectile on the front of a car in the first place. The wildest theory is that it was all calculated marketing. They put a fake diamond on a rookie's car, knowing a rookie was way more likely to crash than a veteran. The real stunt wasn't showing off the diamond, it was the massive media coverage they got from losing it. Sherry Anderson loved her family deeply, especially her two young grandsons. When December came around, she was getting ready for Christmas. But for her family, the holidays now just bring a painful reminder of her disappearance. Sherry was last seen on December 2nd, 2000. She walked out of her home in Stanwood, Washington at 9 o'clock that morning. The night before, she told her daughter her plans. She was going to grab breakfast at McDonald's, pick up some developed photos, visit Walmart, and then head to the Everett Mall. She told her husband John she'd be back by 4 o'clock for dinner. John fell asleep that afternoon and woke up at 5:30 to find the house empty. He called her friend thinking she might be there, but the friend hadn't heard from her. After calling around, a search started at 9 that night. A friend actually found Sherry's car locked and abandoned outside the Everett Mall. There were no bags or presents inside, which makes me think whatever happened occurred before she could even make it back to the car with her purchases. Her purse and the gun she carried for protection were left untouched inside the vehicle. Her family knows she wouldn't just walk away. She was a dedicated social worker, and her bank account hasn't been touched since that day. The family took charge of the search, checking pawn shops for the custom wedding ring she was wearing, a diamond between black onyx set in white gold, but nothing ever turned up. There has been no trace of Sherry since. John filed for divorce a year later, saying he needed to move on. The rest of the family is still looking for answers. Sherry was 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighed 130 pounds. She was biracial, Caucasian, and Cherokee. She was wearing a green jacket, jeans, and white shoes. If you know anything about what happened to Sherry, please contact the Everett Police Department at 425-257-8413. I want to take you back to June 5th, 1991, down in New Mexico. A security guard working the shift at a Super 8 motel right near Interstates 40 and 25 decided to walk over and check on room 233. The people staying there missed their checkout time hours ago. They were supposed to be long gone that morning. I found out the room was actually rented 2 days before, on June 3rd. A guy using the name Eduardo Collin checked in, saying it was for 2 people, just for 1 night. When the motel staff finally unlocked that heavy door, they walked right into a nightmare. A woman was hanging from the shower head in the bathroom. There were empty alcohol bottles scattered all over the place. The workers didn't see any obvious signs of a struggle. Local police rushed over, and early on they figured she did this to herself. The heat that June was brutal, and the room's air conditioning was turned completely off, so her body was already badly decomposed. To me, that points to her dying almost immediately after they got to the room, probably that very first night. The police found zero identification on her. No wallet, no names in her bags, nothing. So they listed her as a Jane Doe. It took until 2021 for a real tip to come in. The public started calling her Becca, and investigators think that might actually be her real first name. She was described as a white or Hispanic woman, somewhere between 25 and 35 years old. She stood around 5 feet 7 inches and weighed about 140 pounds. I picture her with this long, curly, strawberry blonde hair and hazel gray eyes. Her ears were pierced, but she didn't have any tattoos or notable scars. Just a few scrapes on her face and leg. The autopsy later showed heroin in her system, but the medical examiner noted it wasn't a lethal dose on its own, unless, of course, she had never used it before. In the end, they ruled the cause of death as asphyxiation from the hanging. Detectives went through everything in that room, hoping for a name. The item that sticks with me the most is a small photo booth picture left right on the table. It showed her smiling next to an unknown man. The motel staff thought the guy in the photo looked exactly like Eduardo Collin, the man who checked them in. They figured they probably took it at a local mall right before everything went wrong. They also found a small scale on the same table with the name George Martinez scratched into it. Looking at the scene, the police figured the scale was used for drugs. But nobody knows who George Martinez actually is or if it was just a fake name. George Martinez is a pretty common name in New Mexico, after all. Even with a clear photo of her face, finding out who she was turned out to be incredibly tough. Back in 1991, the coroner took her fingerprints and dental records to run against national databases. Nothing matched. They didn't do standard DNA profiling back then, and later attempts got messy because her remains were cremated. That left almost no biological samples to work with, though I hear some preserved evidence from the scene might still have her DNA. From day one, I see 2 massive questions here. Who was this woman, and what really happened to her? It makes you wonder why someone traveling with a partner ends up dying totally alone with nobody looking for her. Eduardo was the only real name the police had. They treated him as the main person of interest. We still don't know if he was just a terrified witness who ran away or if he actively caused her death. If she did it herself, he had the answers about her mindset. If it was murder, he's the guy. But tracking him down was a mess. The info he left at the motel was mostly fake. He used a real name and a real local mailing address, but he wrote down a completely bogus license plate. Years down the road, police tracked down his family and found out he had passed away from natural causes. It's hard to tell if the police verified his death independently, but the paperwork makes it look that way. Then came another twist. When detectives showed the family that photo booth picture, Eduardo's relatives looked at the photo of Becca and the unknown man and were completely certain. They said the man was absolutely not Eduardo, and they had no clue who the smiling woman was. That throws a huge wrench into what the motel staff said. Maybe the staff just misremembered him from that brief moment in the lobby. Or maybe the family wanted to protect his name even after he was gone. Then, in March 2021, a new lead breathed life into the case. Someone came forward to Albuquerque detectives and said the woman went by Becca and came from the Los Angeles area. Right now, the case is stuck. I don't know if they've managed to get a good DNA profile or if they've hired a genealogy company to find her relatives. But even without DNA, I think we can solve this. We have a clear picture of her face. It just needs more eyes on it so Becca can finally get her real name back. The expression she's making in that photo is a double-edged sword. It catches your eye and makes people look at her story, which helps it go viral, but on the flip side, investigators don't have a normal, neutral photo to share instead. What's up, everyone? Get ready for another night of bizarre and unexplained mysteries that will give you chills. Let's go. Rona Louise Monoson was an 18-year-old college freshman in 1972. She attended the University of South Florida. Originally from Long Island, New York, she relocated to Tampa for her studies. She lived in a standard campus dormitory. On the morning of October 2nd, 1972, Rona told her friends she was running an errand at a nearby store. She promised to be back shortly. She drove away in her gray Chevrolet Impala. She never returned to her room. When Rona failed to come back or even call, her friends grew incredibly anxious. It quickly became obvious that the young student had completely vanished. Investigators were left baffled. How does a simple trip to the store result in a total disappearance? For 3 long days, authorities and friends frantically searched for her. Their absolute worst fears became reality on October 5th. Rona's lifeless body was discovered in a secluded pond. It was located about half a mile north of Skipper Road and 30th Street, sitting just outside the USF campus boundaries. An autopsy confirmed the grim details. She had died from blunt force trauma during a brutal assault. The specific location of her body indicated the killer went to significant lengths to conceal the crime. Whatever evidence they uncovered simply wasn't enough to point to a suspect. The police refrained from publicly naming any persons of interest. There was no obvious motive, no signs of a robbery, no known personal vendettas. With so many lingering questions, multiple theories regarding Rona's fate have surfaced over the decades. One prominent idea is that Rona fell victim to a completely random encounter, a violent stranger. She went missing during a mundane daytime errand, and with 0 immediate suspects, it points heavily toward an opportunistic predator. This theory assumes a stranger abducted her near the store. Or perhaps they intercepted her drive. They inflicted the fatal injuries and then discarded her body in the water. Others have speculated about someone she actually knew, maybe a fellow student. An acquaintance from the local area could have easily lured or coerced her. Given the specific time frame, some experts wonder if her slaying connects to other unsolved cases. Serial offenders were highly active in Florida during the early 1970s. Her murder happened just weeks after the unsolved abduction of a 13-year-old girl named Gail Joyner in that exact same region. Could a single offender be responsible for both tragedies? Those who back this theory often point to Gerald Stano. He was a relatively obscure but incredibly prolific offender who might have committed the crime. Despite all these compelling theories, investigators have never officially confirmed a single suspect, or a concrete motive for that matter. The case remains completely open. In the early hours of October 15, 2016, a 26-year-old woman named Katie Jones was walking home. Tragically, she was shot and killed. Katie worked as a waitress at the Midwood Smokehouse down in Charlotte, North Carolina. She had been hanging out with friends in the Plaza Midwood neighborhood. It's a trendy district known for its vibrant nightlife. As the evening wound down, Katie began her walk home alone. She followed her standard route down the 1300 block of the plaza, heading toward Central Avenue. Her friends pointed out that walking home late wasn't unusual for her. She lived just a mile from the Midwood Country Club, which was the bar they visited that night. At 2 a.m., Katie was roughly halfway home. Suddenly, an unknown assailant shot her in the chest. Her body was found a short time later in the driveway of a local real estate business. A resident heard the gunshot and called the police. They arrived too late. The Charlotte Police Department's most promising lead comes from surveillance footage. A camera mounted on a church across the street captured about a minute of Katie walking by. Shortly after she steps out of the frame, a car slowly follows her path. Investigators believe Katie interacted with the people inside that vehicle. They are convinced those occupants are responsible for her murder. Some people speculate this was a botched robbery, but Katie was carrying pepper spray. She was walking in a well-lit area, and absolutely nothing was stolen from her. Her phone and purse were left behind. Other theories lean toward gang violence, like maybe this was part of an initiation rite. Meanwhile, some of her friends think the crime was far from random. They suggest someone offered her a ride home. She declined. That rejection potentially triggered the fatal violence. Despite these different theories, the case sits unsolved today. There are no current suspects. Katie's mother, Giovanna Livingston, has decided to focus entirely on her daughter's life rather than the tragedy of her death. To honor Katie, her friends and family created a scholarship at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. Katie had been forced to pause her education due to financial struggles. Basically, this scholarship aims to support others facing those exact same hurdles. As Livingston explained, Katie couldn't stay in college because she lacked the necessary funding. So for her to help somebody else achieve that goal, that would mean everything to her. She knows her daughter is smiling down. The Bible John case refers to a series of unsolved slayings, specifically 3 young women in Glasgow, Scotland, between 1968 and 1969. While these crimes were all potentially carried out by the same man, a seemingly religiously obsessed individual. The victims: Patricia Docker, age 25, Jemima McDonald, age 32, and Helen Putak, age 29. I mean, they were all mothers. Mothers who had spent their evenings at Glasgow's popular Barrowland Ballroom nightclub, right before being slain. They were found brutally beaten and strangled. Actually, each woman was on her period at the time of death. A grim detail, one that later fueled intense theories about the perpetrator's ultimate motive, you know? Patricia Docker was an auxiliary nurse. She was the first known victim. On February 23, 1968, her body was found in a Glasgow alleyway near her home in the Battlefield district. Like many of her personal belongings were just missing: her clothing and her handbag, her watch. This suggested the perpetrator deliberately removed them from the scene. Initially, doctors received limited leads. Police struggled, basically due to a complete lack of witnesses and physical evidence. Her parents, they had thought she went to a totally different dance hall that night. It was over a week before a witness came forward to confirm seeing her at the Barrowland Ballroom. This single fact led to a significant delay in the initial investigation, so the case went cold. In August 1969, a second attack re-energized the investigation. Jemima McDonald, a 32-year-old mother of 3. She spent the evening of Saturday, August 16, 1969, dancing at the Barrowland Ballroom. When she failed to return home, her sister grew deeply concerned. Tragically, on August 18th, Jemima's body was discovered in an abandoned tenement building. By her own sister, actually. Local children had spoken of finding a body. Unlike Docker, she was found fully clothed, but investigators immediately noted striking similarities between the two cases. Both women had spent their last evenings at the Barrowland, both were strangled, both were on their periods when slain. Then, on October 31st, 1969, the body of Helen Putak was found behind her Glasgow home. This marked the third and final known act of this perpetrator. Helen, 29, had also visited the Barrowland Ballroom the night before. She was accompanied by her sister, Jean Langford. Keep Jean Langford in mind. Her evidence is going to be extremely important going forward in this case. They met 2 men at the dance hall. Oddly, both called themselves John. After midnight, the group of four left together. One man departed earlier to catch a bus. Ellen and Jean, well, they shared a taxi with the other John. During the taxi ride, this well-spoken man revealed oddly intense views. He spoke disapprovingly of married women attending nightclubs. He referenced the Bible repeatedly, remarking on Old Testament punishments for adultery, right? Jean also remembered that he mentioned he didn't drink on New Year's Eve. He preferred to spend his time praying. These comments made a strong impression on Jean. The man insisted on dropping Jean off first, even though her home was farther away, leaving him alone with Helen. It was the last time Jean saw her sister alive. The next morning, Helen Puttick was found in her backyard, partially clothed and brutally beaten. With the third slaying's obvious parallels to the others, a young mother attacked after a barrel-in night out. Police were utterly convinced they faced a serial perpetrator. The manhunt for Bible John escalated rapidly after Helen was discovered. Jean Langford provided a detailed description of the suspect. A tall, slim man, he was well-dressed, in his mid-20s, with short, reddish-blonde hair and overlapping front teeth. Detectives widely distributed the drawing. Interestingly, they noted that his hairstyle was so unfashionable that a local barber might recognize the cut. They ended up showing it to almost 500 local barbers. No leads. The investigation soon became one of the most intensive ever seen in Scotland. Over 100 detectives were assigned full-time, More than 50,000 witness statements were taken. Additionally, thousands of potential suspects were questioned within the first year alone. Undercover officers even patrolled Glasgow dance halls, including the Barrel Inn, hoping Bible John might return to his hunting ground. Despite the massive manhunt and numerous tips, no arrest was made. By the early 1970s, the trail had gone entirely cold. Some officers theorized that the unknown perpetrator might have died, or maybe he had been incarcerated for another crime, or that he may have been investigated and ruled out as a suspect. Trust me, you're going to want to keep that last point in the back of your mind. Others thought he may have simply left the area. This perhaps explained why the slaying stopped as suddenly as they began. With no further cases linked to Bible John, the case gradually moved into the realm of pure speculation. One early avenue of suspicion was that the slayings might not have been the work of a random predator at all, rather the result of separate domestic crimes. In later reviews of the case, some detectives noted that both Patricia Docker and Jemima MacDonald had troubled marital histories. Docker was estranged from her husband Alex at the time of her death. The two were in the process of divorce, and Alex was on leave in Glasgow that week. He was an early suspect. Investigators learned he had a potential motive, and he even checked into a hotel with another woman the very day after Patricia's slaying. This was seen as perhaps a celebratory measure taken by Alex Docker, though nothing could be proven. Likewise, Jemima MacDonald had recently separated from her husband and moved back to Glasgow. These connections led some within law enforcement to believe that at least two of the three Bible John cases might actually have been unrelated attacks perpetrated by people intimately known to the victims. Another suspect emerged years after the Bible John terror, John Irvine McInnes, a former soldier and a cousin of a very senior Glasgow police official. McInnes was never publicly named during the original inquiry, but a secret 1995 review of the case zeroed in on him as a potential Bible John. Detectives in that review suspected that McInnes might have been the unidentified man in the taxi with Helen Puttick. Further, they even suggested that the original lead investigator, Joe Beatty, deliberately steered attention away from McInnes. Why? Because McInnes' cousin was his personal friend. In 1995, police obtained permission to exhume John McInnes' body. McInnes had reached his end voluntarily in 1980. Thankfully, despite the Bible John slayings having taken place in the late 1960s, all biological evidence was preserved. The results were inconclusive, however. The genetic sample did not match, nor did it definitively exclude McInnes. Notably, in a 2022 BBC podcast, the detectives who re-examined the case in 1995 indicated a startling fact. They would have arrested McInnes for the slaying of Helen Puttick if he had still been alive. Oddly, despite incredible improvements in DNA analysis since the mid-90s, the evidence hasn't been retested as yet. That said, the involvement of McInnes remains a controversial theory. While McInnes fit many aspects of the profile, such as being from a strict religious background, Jean Langford couldn't identify him conclusively as the man from the cab. The most famous theory to emerge in modern times is the possible link between Bible John and convicted serial perpetrator Peter Tobin. Tobin, who was from Glasgow, was found guilty of 3 slayings between 1991 and 2006. In 2006, after Tobin's arrest, detectives launched Operation Anagram. The goal was to retrace his life and see if he could be tied to other unsolved crimes. Several intriguing connections came to light. Tobin had lived in Glasgow in the late 1960s, not far from the Barrowland. He even married his first wife in August 1969, right after meeting her at the Barrowland Ballroom itself in 1968. Now, to be fair, this isn't quite as odd as I initially thought it was, given that the venue has a capacity of almost 2,000 people. He was known for his violent hatred towards women. All 3 of his former wives later described the already violent Tobin flying into a terrifying rage when they were on their periods. Investigators have long suspected the Bible John perpetrator targeted his victims during this exact time of the month. This behavioral parallel, along with reports that Tobin was deeply religious, heavily supported this theory. Tobin was also known to use the alias John Semple. Jean Langford couldn't remember the exact last name Bible John gave, but she believed that it was Templeton. Investigators and theorists have noted that Semple sounds extremely close to Temple. However, there's no hard evidence linking Tobin to the Bible John slayings. And actually, there's good evidence that he didn't do it. Going against the theory is the fact that Tobin moved to Brighton, England in early August 1969. His ex-wife has vehemently denied he could have slipped away to Glasgow to commit the final 2 horrendous acts. And wait, let me add this detail. Tobin was 5 feet 6, and Jean Langford had explicitly remembered Bible John being a notably tall individual. I think it's also important to note that Tobin and Bible John simply don't bear any meaningful physical resemblance. Tobin has dark hair and dark eyes. Bible John, even when seen in low light, was identified as having reddish blonde hair and blue eyes. Interestingly, some investigators who've worked on the Bible John case have commented on the strong internal disagreements in the investigation over Tobin being Bible John. That said, the anti-Tobin camp appears to have won out. The Tobin theory is now largely confined to amateur circles rather than official theories. Personally, I think John McInnes needs yet another glance with modernized forensic techniques. It's vital to remember that all 3 of the women were young mothers. The authorities may be able to bring significant closure to their now adult children by finally using these modern techniques. 22-year-old Talis Ahfat has been missing since the early hours of December 16, 2022. His case has absolutely baffled investigators. There's been no trace of him for nearly 2 years. Talis, a resident of Queensland, Australia, was last seen by his family when he left their home that morning. They have not heard from him since, leading them to heavily suspect foul play. Talis was a student at Spinifex State School, where he was an enthusiastic rugby player. He also worked at a nearby cattle station and was a musician who really enjoyed playing the didgeridoo. Around 3 a.m. on the morning he disappeared, Talis left his house on Carbonate Street. CCTV footage captured him walking along Alma Street. He crossed a bridge at approximately 3 a.m., just minutes after leaving his home. When friends and family were unable to reach Talis by December 19th, 3 days after his disappearance, they reported him missing. Despite a comprehensive land and air search, no trace of Talis or his belongings was ever found. A Mount Isa police spokesperson noted that it is highly unusual for a missing person investigation in the area to remain unsolved for such a long period, especially without any clues or witnesses coming forward. Talis's phone records showed no activity since his disappearance. His bank accounts have also been entirely inactive. This leads many to believe he did not leave voluntarily, right? His family expressed deep concern for his safety and medical well-being. Talis actually required daily medication for a condition they did not disclose. Desperate for answers, Talis's family turned to social media, urging the community to report any sightings or information. They firmly believed his disappearance was suspicious, though investigators stated they had found no evidence of foul play. Despite these assurances, the circumstances surrounding Talis's disappearance remain extremely unclear. The investigation has completely stalled due to a lack of new leads. Talis's family continues to hope for a safe return. They keep posting messages on his Facebook account, practically begging him to contact them to alleviate their fears. However, as time passes, the likelihood of resolving his case naturally diminishes. Talis is described as having dark curly hair, short at the back and sides with an average build. He stands 5 feet 5 inches tall, He has a distinctive star tattoo under his left eye and an indigenous flag tattoo on his left forearm. At the time of his disappearance, he was wearing an orange, black, and white shirt, black shorts, black shoes, and a maroon bucket hat. Anyone with information about Talas's disappearance is urged to contact their nearest police station immediately. His family and friends continue to search for answers, holding on to hope that one day they will find out what actually happened to Talas Afat. Jessica Zirinsky disappeared on the evening of November 25, 2022. Despite being spotted on multiple CCTV cameras after her disappearance, these sightings have not brought her family or the police any closer to resolving her case. Jessica, who was 30 years old at the time, suffered from health problems. Initially, her family didn't suspect anything was fundamentally wrong. However, after days of absolutely no contact, they finally reported her missing to the police on December 3rd. The police immediately began a public appeal for information. The last known sighting of Jessica occurred around 1 p.m. in the Bossley Park area of Sydney, Australia. According to the missing person report, she was last seen wearing a yellow long-sleeve shirt, black leggings, and flat shoes. The police also released a CCTV image showing Jessica wearing a gray top earlier that exact same day. As part of the investigation, police meticulously reviewed CCTV footage from the surrounding area. 3 days after she was last seen by family and friends, CCTV footage captured Jessica walking in a suburban area of Bossley Park. In this specific footage, she was wearing an orange sleeveless shirt and black leggings. A short clip of this last known sighting was actively released to the public. It shows Jessica confidently walking across a road, carrying a cream-colored handbag. A bag which she had not been carrying when friends last saw her 3 days earlier. This puzzling footage only heightened police concerns about Jessica's overall safety. Since her disappearance, no other footage has been located. Jessica did have a history of mental health problems, and erratic behavior was not uncommon for her. But I mean, she had never completely disappeared before. She is described as being 5 feet 5 inches tall with a thin build and long hair. She has tattoos on her right index finger, her left wrist, and the back of her neck. Anyone with information about Jessica Zirinsky's disappearance should contact Fairfield Police or Crime Stoppers at 1-800-333-000. Ellen Wilson was last seen withdrawing money from an ATM on CCTV. Her family? They are no closer to discovering what happened in this bizarre missing person case. The last time anyone actually laid eyes on Ellen was the evening of September 11th, 2015. She had spent time at the Australian Hotel. That's a pub located in Ballina, Australia. It is unclear whether she had been drinking. It is believed she drove away in her silver Subaru station wagon. What happened next remains an unsolved mystery. Ellen became a formal missing person after missing a scheduled meeting the following day. Earlier on the day of her disappearance, she spoke with a friend to discuss upcoming volunteer work. Simply not showing up was completely out of character. When friends couldn't reach her, they called the police. Like in many missing person investigations, authorities turned to CCTV footage for answers. Ellen was captured on video in Lismore. Reports indicated this recording happened the day after her pub visit. However, still images released from that footage bore a timestamp of November 11th. There were also scattered reports of her car being spotted in the area over the next few months. None were ever corroborated. Neither Ellen nor her Subaru has ever been found. Police discovered no evidence of foul play. They couldn't rule it out though. The timeline here is critical. If that CCTV footage was recorded on the day she vanished, Ellen likely disappeared on her drive home from the pub. The Australian hotel sits very close to the Richmond River, so it's possible an accident caused her to end up in the water. But if the footage was from the next day, well, something might have occurred between Lismore and Ballina. Ellen remains listed as a missing person. Her case is totally unsolved. She is described as Caucasian with light brown hair and blue eyes. She wears glasses. Her vehicle registration was CB76QX. Anyone holding information that could help resolve this unexplained disappearance should contact Crime Stoppers at 1-800-333-000. Well, on November 3rd, an 84-year-old woman named Elena Roy vanished. She lived in Fallbrook, California, with Chris Catallo. They had been together for 14 years. Actually, they got into an argument that afternoon. Around 1:30 p.m., Elena left their house to take a walk, just to clear her head, you know. Chris expected her back shortly. She didn't return, so he contacted the police to file a missing person report. He told the investigators about her upcoming 84th birthday. Her family was adamant that she just wasn't the type to disappear. Sure, she enjoyed walking, but she always came home after an hour or so. The worrying part? Elena had been showing signs of dementia over the past few years, a major concern for her safety. During the investigation, authorities located some surveillance footage from a local grocery outlet store. It showed Elena inside the building, but the footage was actually captured the day before she went missing. News of her disappearance spread quickly. Hundreds of volunteers jumped in to search Fullbrook and the surrounding areas. Nothing. 60 search and rescue crews combed the region. Even a helicopter was brought in. Still no clues. They monitored her bank accounts for 2 full days, but there was zero activity. It turns out this was entirely normal. Chris was the only one who ever withdrew funds. Elena hadn't touched the account in roughly 2 years. Her family noted how close they were with her. She simply wouldn't stay out of touch without a real reason, right? Naturally, they were frustrated with Chris. He waited until 8:45 that night to call them about the disappearance, basically telling them not to panic. When asked why he delayed the call, his explanation was weak. He claimed he was driving around looking for her and finally decided to reach out when it got dark. The family found it highly suspicious that he let her walk off alone in the first place, especially since he had recently started accompanying her on walks because of her worsening mental state. Chris also admitted he didn't check with anyone in the neighborhood while searching. He didn't want to wake anyone up. I mean, it later came to light that a fireman had previously found Elena walking alone by the side of the road. He took her straight to the sheriff's station. When Chris arrived to pick her up, he acted as if he hardly cared, a reaction the fireman found highly unusual. Chris claimed Elena had been distancing herself from her relatives. The family completely denied this. 3 months later, Chris asked a family member to collect her things. When she arrived, she realized he was hosting a garage sale. He was selling off many of Elena's personal belongings. The family was also disturbed by how he spoke about Elena in the past tense. In one interview, he mentioned plans to relocate, stating there was nothing left keeping him in Fullbrook. A $10,000 reward is currently available for information leading to Elena's discovery. Anyone with details can reach the San Diego Sheriff's Department Homicide Unit at 858-285-6286, or you can call their anonymous tip line at 888-580-8477. In May 1990, 19-year-old Chad Maurer disappeared from his hometown of Madison, Wisconsin under mysterious circumstances. He had been on a lunch break from his new job at a bike shop. He left home to return to work, but he never arrived. 2 days later, on May 21st, Chad's body was discovered in his car. It was parked inside an unlocked garage on Chicago's south side, about 150 miles from Madison. Chicago authorities initially reported that Chad died by his own volition via carbon monoxide poisoning. In support of this, they noted that he was found in the driver's seat with the car's ignition on. The gas tank was empty. The battery was dead. No substances were found in his system, and at first glance, there were no obvious fatal injuries. This lent some credibility to the authorities' initial theory. Chad's shocked parents, however, immediately doubted that their son would do that. He was an upbeat teen with concrete plans to move to Colorado for college. Why would he drive to an unfamiliar Chicago neighborhood to end his life? Their suspicions would soon be bolstered by deeply troubling evidence suggesting Chad's death wasn't voluntary at all. When Chad's parents viewed their son's body at the funeral home, they noticed clear signs of injury that had been overlooked. Chad's knuckles were skinned right down to the bone. He had bruises on his face, indicating he'd been in a fight or physical struggle. The funeral home also noted significant bruising on Chad's lower abdominal area. These findings didn't square with the Chicago police's initial conclusion that there was no evidence of foul play or any trauma on the body. Additionally, Chad's clothing raised massive alarms. His shirt was literally stained with blood, further suggesting a violent altercation. Perhaps most puzzling, crime scene photos showed a jacket in the car that didn't even belong to Chad. He hadn't taken a coat when he left home that cool day, yet there was this unfamiliar jacket resting on the seat next to his body. When the Maurers asked Chicago police to thoroughly examine this jacket, they learned it had gone missing. According to a Chicago detective, the car's window had been broken. Someone apparently stole the jacket before the vehicle could be towed to a secure facility. This complete loss of potential evidence heightened the family's concern that something criminal had occurred. Faced with these glaring inconsistencies, Chad's family urged their local authorities in Wisconsin to get involved. The Dane County coroner examined Chad's body. He found additional injuries that the Chicago coroner hadn't even documented. One critical detail emerged from the autopsy. The level of carbon monoxide in Chad's blood was 74%. Such a high concentration is well above what's typically seen in cases where people do it themselves. This suggested that Chad was entirely unconscious when the car filled with carbon monoxide. In other words, it appeared Chad had been rendered unable to escape and then placed in the car. Confronted with this undeniable evidence of foul play, the Cook County medical examiner changed the manner of death to undetermined in 1991. Authorities finally launched a full, renewed investigation, and of course by this time an entire year had passed since Chad's death. A fact which significantly hampered the investigation, you know? With the case reopened, detectives explored exactly how and why Chad Maurer ended up dead in Chicago. An early tip came in October 1990 after Chad's story was featured on a local Crime Stoppers TV segment. A caller alleged that Chad had become involved in a substance deal with some people living in his Madison apartment complex. These specific individuals had recently moved to Madison from Chicago's South Side. Chicago police had intelligence about a substance trafficking pipeline between Chicago and Madison. This naturally raised the possibility that Chad might have been drawn into transporting illicit goods or acting as a driver for people involved in this dangerous trade. One of the detectives who had initially worked on the case theorized that someone could have offered the cash-strapped teen some quick money. Chad had been aggressively trying to save for a move to Colorado. He needed all the funds he could get. This detective speculated that Chad may have been eliminated upon his arrival in Chicago, immediately after he completed the delivery. Adding weight to this theory, one of Chad's friends later claimed that in 1989, Chad had been paid on 2 separate occasions to transport a street pharmacist from Madison to Milwaukee. Investigators quickly identified 3 young men as potential suspects, the same individuals who had moved from Chicago to Madison shortly before Chad's death. However, police never found enough hard evidence to formally charge anyone in connection with the crime. Aside from the prevalent substance trafficking theory, several other ideas emerged about what could have happened. However, these theories are all incredibly speculative. They don't appear to be based on any form of evidence whatsoever. For instance, one theory puts forward that he traveled to Chicago for a romantic encounter, but was slain by the boyfriend of the girl he was hooking up with. While this is an interesting hypothesis, it's essentially pure fiction, entirely devoid of any connection to the facts of the case. The disappearance of 21-year-old Nadia Erica Cole. It has baffled many, primarily given the peculiar details surrounding the investigation. In May of 2024, Nadia was engaged to a man named Aaron Ong from Idaho. Though she was residing in Port Angeles, Washington, Nadia had recently graduated from Washington State University. She was eagerly anticipating a holiday trip to Italy with her mother, Beata. The trip had been planned for over a year, you know. They were incredibly excited to depart from Seattle-Tacoma International Airport in Washington. Upon arriving at the airport, the case took an unexpected turn. Nadia told her mother she needed to use the restroom and left her carry-on bag with Beata. CCTV footage later obtained by police showed Nadia leaving the airport at 3:08 p.m., appearing visibly anxious. Later that afternoon, around 4 p.m., security footage captured her in downtown Seattle at 3rd Avenue and University Street. She was exiting a streetcar and heading toward the waterfront, after which she seemingly vanished without a trace. When Nadia's family couldn't reach her, they naturally reported her missing. The Port of Seattle Police Department launched an investigation, uncovering more perplexing details. Investigators found that Aaron Ong had also left for a trip that exact same day. He and his young daughter were supposed to go on a fishing trip to Montana and return after 5 days. However, Aaron and his daughter never came back. This prompted his family to report them missing to the Pullman Police Department. A warrant for Aaron's arrest was issued on June 3rd for custodial interference after he failed to return his daughter to her mother. Investigators suspect that Aaron has absconded with his daughter. They believe he had absolutely no intention of returning her. They think his disappearance is linked to Nadia's, though they have yet to find conclusive evidence. A $10,000 reward is currently being offered for information leading to Nadia's current whereabouts. A tip from a member of the public claimed to have seen Nadia in the Washington area in late May, but this could not be confirmed. Nadia is described as having blonde hair and green eyes. She stands 5 feet 9 inches tall and weighs 130 pounds. She was last seen wearing a green hooded top and black yoga pants. She wore a black jacket and white shoes while carrying a tan shoulder bag. Aaron Ong is described as having black hair and brown eyes. He stands around 5 feet 9 inches tall and weighs 135 pounds. While investigators believe the couple is traveling together, this remains entirely speculative. No concrete proof has been found. If you have any information regarding Nadia's case, please contact the Port of Seattle Police Department at 206-787-5411. Anyone with information on Aaron Ong's whereabouts should contact the Pullman Police Department at 509-334-0802. Alternatively, you can reach the Shepherd Shield Security Group at 877-220-8129. The mystery surrounding Nadia Erica Cole's disappearance remains unsolved. Her family and friends continue to seek answers, desperately hoping for her safe return. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the show. Jerry and Rita Alter appeared to be a completely ordinary American couple. However, they turned out to potentially have a very unusual, highly lucrative side hustle. Jerry was a retired public school music teacher. Rita worked as a speech pathologist. They had 2 children who had already safely entered adulthood. All of this is to say, they were very much a normal, middle-class American family, at least from the perspective of their community. In 1977, they departed the endless hustle of New York for a quiet life in Cliff, New Mexico. There, they built a modest ranch-style home on 20 acres of land. Rita quickly found work as a speech therapist in the local public school system, while Jerry, a former band teacher and professional musician, settled comfortably into early retirement. They were known by their immediate neighbors and colleagues as polite, educated people, unremarkable in their daily habits. Friends even described them as not exactly thrill seekers, further underscoring just how normal their existence seemed to outsiders. Despite their seemingly modest fixed income, the Alters managed to travel extensively across the globe. They vacationed frequently during school breaks, ultimately visiting more than 140 different countries. They meticulously documented their journeys in photographs and even authored a published book about their worldwide travels. By the time of their respective deaths, Jerry passing in 2012 and Rita in 2017, the unassuming couple had somehow amassed over $1 million in their savings accounts, but their actual net worth may have been significantly higher than that figure, to say the least. Nothing in their known background ever hinted at criminal behavior. However, this quiet pair would posthumously become the central figures in one of the art world's most astonishing unsolved mysteries. On the morning of November 29th, 1985, the day immediately following Thanksgiving, a daring art heist rapidly unfolded at the University of Arizona Museum of Art in Tucson. Shortly after the building opened to the public around 9 a.m., a man and a woman casually entered the facility. The woman effectively engaged a security guard in conversation on the ground floor. Meanwhile, the man slipped away upstairs to the main gallery. Within minutes, the man carefully sliced a valuable painting completely out of its frame. He rolled it up tightly, concealed it under a heavy garment, and retreated. In just 15 minutes from their initial arrival, the pair confidently walked out of the museum with their stolen prize. The artwork they took was Willem de Kooning's Woman Ochre, a highly valuable piece of abstract expressionist painting. A witness later recalled seeing the thieves speed away from the scene in a red car, but at the time, investigating detectives found very few other leads to follow. There were no usable fingerprints left behind. Furthermore, there was absolutely no security camera footage available in the museum. As a somewhat ironic footnote, the museum administration later decided to use their insurance payout to finally invest in surveillance cameras. Composite sketches based directly on eyewitness descriptions were distributed to the public. They depicted a middle-aged man with curly hair, heavy glasses, and a thick mustache, accompanied by a woman wearing a distinctive scarf and large wire-rimmed glasses. Despite these detailed clues, the case went completely cold. The FBI added Woman Ochre to its premier art crime list, yet years passed without a single break in the mystery. And this was not just a run-of-the-mill painting. The stolen piece was estimated to be worth up to $150 million in today's currency. For over 3 decades, the fate of the painting remained utterly unknown. The audacious thieves and the priceless canvas had simply vanished into thin air. The mystery of the missing de Kooning took a highly dramatic turn in August 2017. Following Rita Alter's death that summer, the couple's estate was quickly liquidated by their two sons. An antique and furniture dealer operating in Silver City, New Mexico, purchased the entire household contents for roughly $2,000. While actively clearing out the Alters' remote home in Cliff, store co-owner David Van Acker noticed an unusually large, framed painting hanging behind the master bedroom door. The artwork was strategically positioned so that it would be completely hidden from view whenever the door was fully open. Furthermore, a homemade wooden doorstop physically prevented the door from swinging wide enough to strike the canvas. The painting itself was dirty, heavily cracked, and covered in thick dust and cobwebs. This heavily suggested it had hung in that concealed spot undisturbed for many years. Van Acker and his business partners brought the painting back to their shop. Their visiting artists and knowledgeable customers immediately remarked that the piece looked exactly like an authentic de Kooning. Suspicious that it could actually be the long-lost woman ochre, Van Acker quickly contacted the museum administration in Arizona. In a stunning public revelation, art experts and museum officials conclusively confirmed that the canvas was indeed the original woman ochre, the exact piece stolen on that November day in 1985. The rediscovered masterpiece was promptly turned over to authorities, restored, and eventually returned to public display at the University of Arizona Museum of Art. With the painting officially found in Jerry and Rita Alter's possession, the focus of the investigation sharply turned to whether this quiet, unassuming couple could have been the actual thieves. Investigators and journalists soon unearthed several highly compelling clues. One primary piece of circumstantial evidence was a photograph taken at a family Thanksgiving gathering in Tucson. The date on the photo was November 28, 1985, the exact day before the heist occurred. In the photo, Jerry and Rita Alter are clearly seen smiling at a dinner table with relatives, placing them squarely in the same city as the museum just hours before the robbery. According to some analysts, the original police composite sketches of the suspects, when compared in hindsight, bore a notable resemblance to the couple's facial features. The sketch of the woman aligns strikingly well with Rita Alter's appearance at the time. The sketch of the male suspect doesn't immediately resemble Jerry's natural look, but investigators theorize he may have been wearing a fake mustache and perhaps a wig as a disguise. The man in the police sketch also appeared to have a dark tan. Given that the family picture from the day prior shows Jerry without one, this lowers the likelihood of a perfect match, though theatrical makeup remains a strong possibility. Other coincidences continually raised eyebrows during the retrospective investigation. According to the Alter's nephew, Ron Rosenman, the couple had a distinct habit of purchasing red vehicles. In fact, almost every single car they ever owned was painted red. This specific detail bolstered the suspicion that the Alters could have been the elusive pair who fled the museum in a red getaway car. Moreover, the bizarre way woman ochre was hidden inside their home heavily indicated a conscious desire to keep it a secret. Van Acker explicitly noted that when he removed the painting from behind the bedroom door, its outline was clearly visible on the wall behind it. This meant it had hung in that exact spot for an incredibly long time. He later publicly stated his belief that it had been hiding there since the day it was stolen. Indeed, the couple never displayed the painting openly to any house guests. One of the most startling clues actually came from Jerry Alter's own published writing. In 2011, Jerry self-published a small book of short stories titled The Cup and the Lip: Exotic Tales. In one specific story, titled Eye of the Jaguar, a grandmother and granddaughter cleverly team up to visit a local museum. They intentionally distract a security guard and seamlessly steal the museum's prize jewel. Instead of selling this stolen item, a massive 120-carat emerald, they hide it away behind a secret wall panel, making a solemn promise that only their eyes will ever see it. The fictional thieves in the tale leave absolutely no evidence behind. The direct parallels to the woman ochre heist are completely unmistakable. The distraction of a lone guard, the prized object taken without a trace, a secretive hiding spot designated purely for the culprit's private enjoyment. It strongly appears Jerry may have arrogantly memorialized the very crime he and his wife were suspected of committing. Despite all of these compelling clues, there is no direct physical proof conclusively tying the Alters to the actual theft. No latent fingerprints, no positive eyewitness identification. By the time woman ochre was finally recovered, Jerry and Rita were both deceased. Thus, they were never interrogated, arrested, or formally charged with the crime. Their two adult children have not provided any information that sheds light on how their parents came to possess the stolen painting, consistently maintaining they didn't even know it was behind the door until 2017. Officially, the criminal case remains completely unsolved, but virtually all circumstantial evidence firmly points toward Jerry and Rita Alter as the likely culprits who successfully pulled off the legendary heist. The major question still hanging over this case is obvious. Why did they do it at all? One theory, largely favored by their surviving friends and family, is that the Alters might have simply acquired the painting through unconventional means, but not by direct theft. Ron Rosenman, their nephew, publicly wondered if his aunt and uncle could have purchased the de Kooning on the black market, or perhaps unknowingly bought it from the real thieves. He theorized a scenario where the couple were discreetly approached at a local art show by someone offering the painting for cheap, and the Alters simply couldn't resist the incredible bargain. This particular theory sounds very much like the rationalization of an individual struggling to accept that their relatives orchestrated a massive felony. Notably, the couple never once attempted to sell the painting or profit from it in any way, even though it was immensely valuable. This single fact has led many behavioral experts to speculate that Jerry and Rita stole purely for the adrenaline thrill, or perhaps out of an obsessive love of art, rather than for financial gain. Adding significantly to the intrigue, in 2023 and 2024, federal investigators began aggressively probing whether the Alters were involved in other historic art thefts. During the exact same year that Woman Ochre was stolen, 2 other valuable paintings went missing from the Harwood Museum of Art in Taos, New Mexico during a March 1985 burglary. The FBI has officially joined the active investigation into these unsolved thefts, deeply suspecting Jerry and Rita Alter may have been directly responsible for those as well. If this proves true, it would mean the quiet couple actually pulled off multiple, highly successful art heists in 1985, perhaps utilizing similar methods of calculated distraction and stealth. This has led to widespread conjecture that the couple's secret life as professional art thieves might have extended far beyond the single de Kooning case. However, no other stolen artworks have been definitively linked to their estate to date. The sheer audacity of the suspected crimes continues to fascinate the public, presenting a portrait of a highly synchronized, incredibly secretive partnership. The tragic death of Christine de Serra, a young Filipino flight attendant, continues to be a massive subject of public intrigue and intense controversy. She was found deceased on the very morning of January 1st, 2021, located at the City Garden Grand Hotel in Makati, situated in the Philippines. Security camera footage captured from the hotel in the hours right before her passing placed her actively at the scene. Her highly publicized case has sparked heated nationwide debates over the local investigation's exact direction, the highly questionable handling of forensic evidence, and the deeply conflicting narratives regarding her actual cause of death. Christine was 23 years old when she originally checked into the City Garden Grand Hotel on New Year's Eve 2020. She had specifically asked her mother for permission to join a large celebration with her coworkers, a seemingly innocent decision that would soon turn entirely tragic. After spending several hours socializing at the hotel, Christine was rushed to the Makati Medical Center early on January 1st, 2021. There, she was formally declared dead on arrival by medical staff. Surveillance footage captured fleeting moments from her final hours, clearly showing her in the company of several friends and acquaintances mingling in the hotel lobby and its corridors. Shortly after noon, her lifeless body was formally discovered inside the bathtub of room 2207, presenting with noticeable dark bruises and several signs of possible physical abuse. Initial police reports quickly described the incident as a highly violent SA slaying. This hasty conclusion led to rapid charges being filed against 11 men who were documented as present at the hotel party. According to these early police statements, there were very strong indications that Christine had been brutally assaulted, including alarming reports of deep bruises, lacerations, and biological material allegedly recovered from the scene. However, the subsequent official autopsy, completely conducted by Police Major Michael Nick Sarmiento, surprisingly revealed that Christine de Serra died strictly from a ruptured aortic aneurysm, which is classified as a natural cause of death. The official autopsy did note various lacerations on her thighs, multiple contusions on her knees, and several scratches, which severely complicated the clinical picture. These strange physical findings raised massive questions about whether the noted injuries resulted from a violent altercation, or if they were simply incidental to her underlying medical condition. The deeply conflicting evidence found in the initial autopsy, combined with the family's own severe doubts, spurred a demand for a second autopsy, the specific details of which remained highly confidential. The case quickly evolved into a massive, highly public battle of competing narratives. On one side, the Philippine National Police firmly maintained that Christine's death was entirely natural. They constantly cited the first autopsy report that strongly pointed to an aortic aneurysm as the sole cause of death. On the other side, the victim's family and several vocal critics angrily argued that the glaring physical evidence strongly pointed to possible covered up foul play. Furthermore, the specific way in which the initial investigation was conducted has also drawn considerable widespread criticism. The PNP's rapid decision to initially label the complex case as fully solved after hastily identifying a group of suspects who were all later released due to totally insufficient evidence has been widely denounced by legal experts as dangerously premature. Critics argue that the intense rush to judgment not only unfairly tarnished the public reputations of the individuals involved, but it also left massive, unanswered questions regarding the proper clinical handling of forensic evidence at the scene. In particular, the shocking decision to fully embalm Christine's body before a completely comprehensive forensic examination could occur has been heavily criticized by medical professionals. They correctly note that this drastic action may have completely compromised the secure collection of crucial, potentially case-solving biological evidence. What actually happened to Christine still remains a deep, tragic mystery, with her haunting final images revealing incredibly little about what actually transpired in that hotel room on that fateful night. The internet, well, it has a assisted habit of giving forgotten mysteries a second life. So this is especially true when those mysteries revolve around a truly disturbing piece of media. Someone unearths an eerie or perhaps entirely horrific recording from the past. Then that footage gets copied, mirrored, re-uploaded dozens of times across various platforms. Netizens and amateur detectives begin dissecting every single frame, looking for hidden details. And yet, despite millions of individuals analyzing the footage to absolute exhaustion, nobody ever uncovers the actual truth behind the events. One of the most unsettling examples of this phenomenon is a grainy VHS tape. It dates back to the mid-1980s and centers on a martial arts instructor named Bobby Joe Blythe. Blythe was a former Marine, well known for a highly abrasive personality. He openly claimed to have enjoyed taking lives during his military service. He also constantly boasted that many of his students served as bodyguards and local police officers, basically implying a level of untouchability. Rumors circulated that he would deliberately lure transients into his training center just so his advanced black belts could inflict severe beatings upon them. Aside from martial arts, Blythe instructed people in the use of firearms. He actually drew immense public criticism after staging a fatal shooting scenario in front of a group of children, loudly challenging them with the phrase,
"If you're so good at karate, so good, you stop this!"
But as bizarre as that particular event was, it has largely been overshadowed by the tape in question. The recording surfaced online in 2009, bearing the title, "Jesus Taught Me."
This guy, like I say, he's a priest. He's a 10th degree red belt. And who'd you say promoted you to 10th degree red belt? Jesus did. Okay. Okay. And I know every one of us would like to be taught by someone that has been taught by Jesus. Correct, John? Absolutely. Because I guarantee you, that's got to be some movements to behold, right?
Well, I won't brag or anything of that nature, but
Video starts off in an almost comical manner. A homeless gentleman wanders into Blythe Street Mall Dojo in Dumfries, Virginia, claiming that the Lord had personally taught him martial arts. Because his true identity has never been established by authorities, online communities have since dubbed this man KFG, or Kung Fu Guy. Bobby Joe Blythe sarcastically introduces the supposed martial arts master. He then actively encourages him to showcase his skills on one of his students, a black belt named Willie J. Dennis. It is immediately clear that KFG does not want to physically spar with Dennis. In fact, he explicitly states that he only wants to demonstrate his moves around the student rather than directly engage with him. At one point, he even clearly says,
I just wish to teach you. I don't wish to hurt you. Teach me.
With that sudden exclamation, Dennis strikes out at the man. KFG immediately counters the aggression with some energetic kicks and punches of his own, firmly stating, "Don't do that anymore." But Dennis does not back down.
No, just don't do that. That. Good. I'm not a fighter.
As the sparring continues, Dennis actually slips on the mat and completely fails to land a sweeping kick. And though his opponent's movements are highly theatrical, to an untrained observer, it actually appears that KFG is the more skilled fighter in the room. Perhaps feeling like he had deeply embarrassed himself in front of his peers and his instructor, Dennis gives up on formal technique. He turns the martial arts demonstration into a brutal street brawl. He violently grabs KFG, punches him square in the face, and then tosses him to the ground while shouting an expletive. Dennis continues to relentlessly strike KFG. The older man manages to get back on his feet, repeatedly saying that he does not want to fight anymore. What follows is incredibly difficult to document. Rather than halting the aggression, Dennis continues attacking KFG, landing a massive hit that knocks him directly to the ground. Unable to control his volatile emotions, Dennis then knees KFG in the head. This blow knocks the man into a solid metal pole, instantly rendering him unconscious. Dennis then proceeds to stomp on the unconscious man's head repeatedly. Warily, when the brutal onslaught finally ends, KFG can be heard drawing labored, guttural breaths, which sounds exactly like a person struggling with a severely obstructed airway. According to medically trained professionals who have analyzed the audio of the footage, that specific breathing pattern is highly consistent with a severe traumatic brain injury. Throughout all of this chaos, Bobby Joe Blythe makes absolutely no attempt to intervene. Instead, he simply orders his students to drag KFG out the back door. The camera lens then lingers on a thick trail of blood leading out of the building. Blythe provides a chilling narration over the scene. What we have here is the trail of the Kung Fu master as he is departing my dojo, just taken on 13 December 1984, about 7 p.m.
What we have here is the trail of the Kung Fu master as he is departing my dojo. Just taken on 13 December 1984, about 7 p.m.
The video ends not with a rational explanation of what happened to the unconscious victim, but rather on a worryingly large red smear left on the rear exit door. For 25 long years, that specific tape gathered dust in Bobby Joe Blythe's private collection. In fact, it only came to light in 2009 because Blythe, for reasons known only to himself, decided to digitize the recording and upload it to his personal YouTube channel under the handle Bobby Joe Blythe 007. In the comment section of the upload, many viewers harshly criticized the black belt, Dennis. Blythe himself even responded to the backlash, callously stating, "If it would have took longer, I would have dropped them both. I was very disappointed with my guy and he paid for a week after that." But other viewers were vastly more concerned for KFG. His sustained injuries looked, and frankly sounded, completely catastrophic. People naturally assumed the absolute worst outcome. As public criticism grew rapidly, Blythe updated the video's description text. He claimed that the injured man was merely a local nuisance who frequently stole pizza. He wrote that the man apparently had the beating coming, and added that he had simply left him in a commercial dumpster for the local police to pick up. Because it was not at all clear whether KFG was ever found alive or deceased, the viral video was ultimately forwarded to law enforcement agencies. Quietly, dedicated investigators began examining whether the tape might actually depict an unsolved, unreported homicide. Many professionals, including Hampton Police Chief Carlos Smithers, strongly believed it did.
Having seen him get stomped, his head stomped as many times as he did, I would be surprised that he survived it or did not at least have major brain damage.
Though the original video itself was eventually removed by YouTube for its graphic content, the public interest in solving the case never faded away. Internet sleuths began obsessively trying to identify the homeless man to determine his final fate. Dedicated web pages even popped up to help crowdsource the mystery. Perhaps the largest online group, known as Justice for Kung Fu Guy, produced a detailed series of enhanced screenshots highlighting the victim's face. After digging relentlessly through historical missing persons reports, they discovered one involving a man named Richard Ricardo Dyer. He did physically resemble KFG. The issue with this theory, however, is that Dyer did not officially disappear until January 1987. That is around 2 years after the dojo incident was supposedly filmed, assuming, of course, that Blythe provided the correct date in the tape's narration. All in all, it seems highly unlikely that Richard Dyer was the Kung Fu Guy. Other than a passing facial resemblance, there is nothing concrete to suggest a match. The only known piece of evidence that hints at the true fate of KFG is the verbal testimony of a local law enforcement officer. A retired Prince William County detective named Chuck Feldbush publicly claimed that he actually knew both Bobby Joe Blythe and the victim. According to his recollection, the homeless man, whose legal name he could not remember, was a local vagrant who lived out in the woods near the martial arts studio. He was occasionally arrested for minor nuisance offenses, such as stealing pizza from local restaurants. The detective explicitly stated that he encountered the man several days after the filmed assault. He noted the man was limping badly, clearly having been beaten up, but he was apparently still alive. The detective also claimed that the injured man actively refused to pursue any criminal charges regarding the incident. No official police records have ever surfaced publicly confirming that officer's specific account, meaning to this day, KFG's true identity and ultimate fate haven't been established beyond Feldbush's unverified recollection. Even if the detective's statement is to be taken as fact, it certainly doesn't rule out the possibility that the victim passed away from internal injuries in the subsequent days or weeks following the encounter. As for Bobby Joe Blythe himself, a separate candid video would later surface online. In it, he can be heard casually lecturing his students about how he maintains strong police contacts and can basically get away with anything inside his studio.
We don't tolerate bullshit from nobody in our domain. We black belts, this is our place. We can do what we want anytime we feel like it, and feel free as anybody could be in this world.
Now, he could have just been lying to impress his younger students, or he could have been telling the absolute truth about his local influence. What remains certain is that Blythe and his students never faced any criminal charges in connection with the Kung Fu Guy incident, despite the fact that the entire brutal assault was caught on camera. This glaring lack of accountability has led some researchers to strongly suspect a police cover-up. The theory suggests the sensei was protected by the very small-town cops he had previously helped train. Indeed, some analysts find it incredibly coincidental that the only specific offenses Officer Feldbush recalled KFG being guilty of, such as taking food off people's plates at a local Pizza Hut, just so happened to be the exact same accusations Blythe listed in his YouTube video description. And today, more than 40 years after the violent incident was filmed, the most basic, fundamental questions about the tape remain completely unanswered. Who was KFG? What happened to him after he was dragged out of the dojo? Did he actually survive his injuries, or did one of the internet's earliest viral crime videos capture an unsolved homicide? Nobody has ever produced a definitive answer to these questions. Because the victim's identity has never been publicly confirmed, it is entirely possible that the only individuals who know what really happened have simply chosen to remain silent all these years. In October 1980, 47-year-old Cynthia Jabbour completely vanished while living in Las Vegas. Over the ensuing years, her cold case was aggressively linked to several other high-profile missing persons investigations. The sprawling narrative eventually culminated in a landmark slaying conviction, despite the absolute lack of a recovered body. Cynthia Jabbour was last seen alive around 10:30 p.m. on October 5, 1980. She was standing in the lobby of her boyfriend's Las Vegas condominium building. She had explicitly told several close friends that she intended to permanently end her relationship with him that very night. Her given reason was his increasingly jealous and deeply possessive behavior. When Jabbour unexpectedly failed to return to her own home, concerned friends checked her apartment 2 days later and found absolutely no trace of her presence. No personal belongings were missing from the residence. Soon after the search began, Jabbour's personal vehicle turned up abandoned in a massive parking lot outside the Caesars Palace Hotel. Furthermore, she had left behind roughly $47,000 in various financial investments, assets that she presumably would not have abandoned voluntarily under normal circumstances. From the very outset of the investigation, these glaring signs heavily pointed to foul play, rather than a voluntary, planned disappearance. Police detectives quickly focused their attention on Jabbour's boyfriend, Robert Weeks, viewing him as the prime suspect in the case. When formally questioned, Weeks casually claimed she had simply canceled their evening dinner plans, stating he had absolutely no idea where she went afterward. Investigators were immediately skeptical of his unverified story. Weeks initially agreed to undergo a polygraph test to clear his name, but then abruptly backed out at the last minute, bizarrely claiming he suddenly had to leave town for business. Within a single month of Jabbour's disappearance, Weeks completely fled the country, traveling first to Mexico and then eventually relocating to Chile. His sudden, unannounced flight greatly heightened law enforcement's suspicion of his direct involvement in her presumed death. However, with their main suspect gone and absolutely no physical evidence recovered, the case essentially went cold for years. Despite the standstill, Weeks remained the primary focus of investigators' lingering suspicions. Notably, exactly 3 years later, Weeks brazenly re-entered the United States. He utilized a forged Libyan passport, officially issued under the fake name of Robert Smith. Somehow, this glaring border anomaly didn't set off any immediate security alarms. He was able to easily resettle and seamlessly resume his life in the States, openly living as a Libyan national named Robert Smith. Somehow, this particular detail remains one of the most absurd aspects of the entire timeline. A major investigative break finally occurred in 1986 when another woman intimately involved in Weeks' life vanished in a strikingly similar manner. On April 5, 1986, one of Weeks' new girlfriends, a woman named Carolyn Riley, disappeared in San Diego. She vanished on the exact night she allegedly intended to break up with him. Her car was later found abandoned at a local hotel, perfectly mirroring the exact circumstances of Jabour's case. This alarming coincidence prompted detectives to dig much deeper into Weeks' hidden past. They quickly discovered a highly disturbing behavioral pattern that extended far beyond Cynthia Jabbour. Robert's ex-wife Patricia had vanished in Las Vegas back in April 1968, shortly after their bitter divorce was finalized. Her car was found completely abandoned. At the time, Weeks claimed she had suffered a severe nervous breakdown and simply fled the state. Unsurprisingly, she was never seen or heard from again by anyone. Additionally, Weeks' former business associate, a man named Jim Shaw, went missing in May 1971, immediately following a heated public argument with him. To Harpsa, Shaw's vehicle was later found abandoned, and forensic teams discovered significant signs of extreme violence inside the cabin. With all 4 distinct cases spanning 18 years firmly linked to Robert Weeks, investigators logically concluded they were dealing with a highly dangerous single perpetrator. In 1987, the massive investigation received vital nationwide exposure when the complicated case was profiled on national television. In May 1987, a viewer tip successfully led police to a residence in Tucson, Arizona, where Weeks was quietly living under an alias. He was promptly arrested by local authorities on an unrelated fraud charge. This tactical arrest safely allowed authorities to hold him in custody while they meticulously built their big slaying case. Weeks was soon extradited back to Nevada, and shortly after his arrival, he was formally indicted for the slayings of both Cynthia Jabbour and his ex-wife, Patricia. He was heavily suspected in the Riley and Shaw cases as well, though prosecutors ultimately found that there was currently insufficient physical evidence to officially charge him for those crimes. Robert Weeks went on trial in Las Vegas during April 1988. State prosecutors fiercely argued that Weeks was a deeply possessive, highly violent man who would resort to absolutely anything to permanently prevent the women in his life from leaving him. Multiple witnesses testified under oath about his extreme jealousy and heavily abusive behavior, emphasizing repeatedly that neither Cynthia nor Patricia would have ever left their established lives behind voluntarily. One of the most incredibly incriminating pieces of evidence presented to the jury was Weeks' own personal diary. In one specific entry, he angrily wrote that Cynthia had humiliated him beyond belief. He then explicitly vowed in ink to even the score. Such written admissions provided the prosecution with the exact leverage they needed. Somewhat controversially regarding legal procedure, the circumstantial evidence related to Carol Riley and Jim Shaw was also allowed to be formally entered into evidence during the trial, despite Weeks not being officially charged in relation to those specific disappearances. Ultimately, Weeks was found guilty by the jury of first-degree slayings in both Cynthia's and Patricia's cases. In April 1988, a judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Notably, it marked the very first time in Nevada legal history that a conviction of such magnitude was successfully achieved without a victim's physical body being presented as evidence. Even long after his historic conviction, Robert Weeks never once revealed what truly became of Cynthia Jabbour or the other missing individuals. None of the 4 victims' physical remains have ever been recovered by search teams. Investigators heavily suspect that Weeks hid the bodies deep in remote abandoned desert mine shafts, which would perfectly explain the total lack of physical evidence recovered over the decades. Weeks ultimately took the dark secret of his victims' deaths to the grave with him, permanently denying the grieving families the ultimate closure they so desperately sought. Paula Abdul is a highly successful American singer, choreographer, and television personality. She originally rose to massive fame in the late 1980s with a long string of chart-topping pop hits. In 1991, she began her highly anticipated worldwide Under My Spell tour. The massive production lasted until the very end of 1992. 2 years later, however, she made a truly startling public claim. She stated that in 1992, she had narrowly survived a horrific plane crash during that very tour. This alleged event left her seriously injured and forcibly sidelined her from performing on stage for an extended, multi-year period. Abdul has graphically described undergoing 15 separate spinal surgeries as a direct result of the crash, stating the traumatic incident entirely derailed her thriving career for 7 long years. Paula Abdul has publicly recounted the harrowing plane crash story on multiple television occasions, frequently providing vivid, terrifying details of the incident and its brutal aftermath. According to her very earliest accounts, the crash occurred in 1992 while she was privately traveling between scheduled concert stops on a small plane. She explicitly stated, "It all happened when I boarded a 7-seater plane, and an hour into the flight, one of the engines blew up and the right wing caught fire and everything went black." The very next thing she remembered, she claimed to interviewers, was waking up in a hospital bed. "I woke up in the hospital only to find that I had crushed my cervical spine, leaving me partially paralyzed." Abdul says the terrifying crash left her with severe physical injuries that required extensive, ongoing medical intervention. During her lengthy recovery process, she experienced chronic, debilitating pain and highly limited mobility. The famous singer has often emphasized how the horrific incident abruptly halted her massive career momentum at its absolute peak. She has frequently indicated that because of the fiery crash and the ensuing health struggles, she had to step away from performing entirely for several years. In fact, Abdul often quantifies the hiatus at about 7 full years of professional downtime before she could finally return to work. This timeline would roughly correspond to the period stretching from the early 1990s until the early 2000s, just before her massive reemergence in the public eye as a judge on the hit show American Idol. While Abdul's story is undeniably compelling and tragic, numerous factual inconsistencies and glaring gaps in physical evidence have led many observers to deeply question its overall authenticity. There are several significant, key issues that strongly cast doubt on her plane crash claim. According to investigators and skeptics, deep dives into the claim have turned up absolutely no official government record of any plane crash occurring in 1992 or 1993 that matches Paula Abdul's vivid description. The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, which meticulously logs all aviation accidents, has absolutely no record of a crash involving Abdul, nor does the agency have any record of a small plane incident occurring on the specific dates and locations she has frequently mentioned. Additionally, no contemporaneous news reports or media coverage can be found anywhere documenting such a massive event, even though a celebrity plane crash of that magnitude would be fully expected to make global headlines instantly. Furthermore, skeptics strongly argue that even if the physical crash site could have been kept off official flight records, the sudden attendance of a major A-list celebrity at a public hospital for a fiery plane crash would have inevitably led to massive leaks to the tabloid press. According to skeptics, this absolute absence of evidence is a highly significant red flag. Another massive issue arises from potentially inconsistent claims about the crash timeline that she has made over the years. Abdul's own public statements about exactly when the crash happened have varied significantly over time, directly leading to deep confusion about the actual timeline. In some interviews, she has explicitly referred to the crash occurring in 1992 during the Under My Spell tour. Yet, in other interviews, she has strongly implied it happened in 1993, well after the tour's official end. This discrepancy is highly problematic because Abdul's massive world tour officially concluded in 1992. And she definitively wasn't touring in 1993. This is a problem, according to skeptics, because from her very earliest accounts, the alleged plane trip specifically took place while she was actively on tour. For example, Abdul once firmly stated the accident happened exactly on her birthday in June 1993, even though by that specific time, her tour had long since ended. Given the highly dramatic nature of the claim, one would logically expect other people to have been directly involved and to openly remember the terrifying event. Abdul specifically described being on a 7-seater plane. Presumably, there was a pilot, possibly a co-pilot, and other passengers or crew members present on board. To date, absolutely no pilot or fellow passenger has ever come forward publicly to corroborate Abdul's harrowing story. There are no known eyewitness accounts from any airport personnel, emergency medical responders, or flight crew that support the occurrence of a fiery emergency landing or crash involving Abdul. A small plane making an emergency crash landing with a massive pop star on board would highly likely have been documented, or at least remembered by others. Yet absolutely no such testimonies exist anywhere in the public record. Another potential contradiction lies deeply in Abdul's own explanations for her chronic bodily injuries. In some narratives, Abdul has actually mentioned 2 entirely separate accidents occurring in the early 1990s, the alleged plane crash and a separate, confirmed 1992 car accident, as both contributing heavily to her health issues. According to a 2019 interview published in Parade magazine, Abdul experienced 2 distinct accidents: a 1992 car crash that definitely left her with severe neck injuries, and a 1993 plane crash that allegedly left her partially paralyzed. This directly raises questions about whether the plane crash alone was solely responsible for her medical problems, or if the dramatic story slowly evolved from a combination of different traumatic events over time. According to skeptics, the direct overlap of a very serious car wreck in the exact same time frame might fully explain all of Abdul's physical injuries, completely casting doubt on the absolute need for a separate plane crash incident at all. It remains entirely unclear why Abdul sometimes highly highlights one incident versus the other, and the ongoing inconsistency in her varying accounts of what actually caused her spinal damage has heavily fueled public skepticism. To skeptics, all of these glaring contradictions strongly suggest that Abdul's plane crash story simply doesn't add up neatly. Supporters or highly sympathetic observers of Paula Abdul actively argue that there are valid reasons, completely aside from intentional deceit, that could easily explain the noted discrepancies in her plane crash story. Surviving a truly catastrophic event, or even simply believing one has, can be incredibly traumatic. The resulting physical and mental trauma can deeply affect long-term memory. Another highly significant possibility is that there was indeed a very real in-flight emergency, or an incredibly hard, terrifying landing that Abdul experienced, but that it wasn't officially classified by aviation authorities as a formal crash. For instance, the plane's pilot might have heroically managed to make a rough emergency landing at a very small airfield or an open, grassy area without formally notifying federal authorities. Supporters argue that since there were absolutely no fatalities, the terrifying incident could have been handled completely privately, without officially involving the authorities or large insurance companies. In such a specific scenario, the event might not physically appear in official government records if it simply wasn't reported as an accident. Abdul could simply be describing this highly frightening close call as a crash, in layman's terms. Some analysts have speculated that perhaps the small plane did actually encounter severe mechanical trouble in the air, exactly like the engine fire she vividly described. They suggest the pilot had to land abruptly and violently, giving Abdul the distinct impression of having narrowly survived a crash, even if the official NTSB criteria weren't legally met. Notably, people can and do suffer from highly significant injuries in very hard aircraft landings, which may perfectly explain why she sustained such severe trauma to her neck and backs. This would still constitute a terrifying incident that caused lifelong physical trauma, just not one that left the specific kind of public bureaucratic trace investigators would normally expect. Furthermore, supporters rightly point out that she undoubtedly suffers from severe chronic pain issues, which undeniably did derail her massive career at its absolute height. For now, the absolute truth of the matter remains completely unknown. Both skeptics and devoted supporters continue to raise compelling, interesting points regarding the events of that era, leaving the final conclusion open to ongoing historical debate. She was a 26-year-old Belgian mother, originating from Mechelen, a historic city located near Antwerp. She vanished completely in 2010, but shockingly, her disappearance wasn't officially reported to the police for 14 years. She had a highly turbulent early life, enduring a difficult childhood and spending significant time in institutional care. At 18, Heidi firmly cut off all contact with her biological family. She then moved in with her much older boyfriend, relocating to the municipality of Balen. The origins of this relationship were highly unconventional and disturbing, a detail that becomes highly relevant later on in the investigation. By 2008, the couple were actively living together in Balen, managing a household along with their 3 young children, who were then ages 2, 3, and 7. Described by neighbors as leading a very isolated life with incredibly few social contacts, Heidi largely kept to herself. She was not close with others beyond the walls of her immediate household. In mid-2010, Heidi DeShepard disappeared suddenly, doing so without leaving any warning or trace. According to an acquaintance, she simply vanished from one day to the next, taking along all of her personal belongings. Her live-in boyfriend, who was also the biological father of her children and previously acted as her foster parent, later confirmed to authorities that Heidi went missing in 2010, but tellingly, absolutely no one reported her officially missing at the time. Not a single family member, no friends. Not even her long-term partner bothered to contact the police when she vanished. Her ex-boyfriend did casually inform a local social services office that she had supposedly moved away, allegedly doing so just to avoid illegally drawing government benefit checks in Heidi's name for their shared children. But that was the absolute extent of his notifications. As a direct result of this silence, the disappearance went entirely unnoticed by national authorities for years. In fact, official government records even provided the bureaucratic illusion that Heidi had simply moved away to start fresh. The absolute last administrative trace of her existence was the physical collection of a provisional driver's license on May 6, 2010. However, it remains highly unclear if Heidi herself actually picked the document up from the office. That provisional license was never upgraded to a permanent status, and her national identity card subsequently expired in 2011 without any attempt at renewal. By November 2010, an unknown individual had formally informed the local Balen government that Heidi was no longer residing at her registered address. After a routine administrative check by government officials, her name was officially removed from the population register. Administratively speaking, it was exactly as if Heidi DeShepard had safely moved away or simply ceased to exist entirely. In Belgium, this specific type of bureaucratic deletion meant Heidi's prolonged absence simply didn't raise any legal wrongs. It was only by sheer chance, nearly 14 years later, that the dark truth finally came to light. In late 2023, a standard report generated from the school of one of her children alerted local authorities to a strange anomaly. The mother had been inexplicably absent from all records for a very long time. This red flag eventually triggered a severely belated missing person investigation. Finally, in January 2025, the Belgian Federal Police officially issued a wide public appeal for any information regarding Heidi DeShepard's long-standing disappearance. The bizarre case immediately gripped the nation of Belgium. Media headlines repeatedly asked how a young mother of 3 children could possibly vanish for 14 years without anyone noticing or bothering to report it. Police officials revealed that despite extensive inquiries conducted over the past year, they had found absolutely no trace of Heidi's existence, not in Belgium nor anywhere abroad. Approximately 20 tips have trickled in since the cold case went public, mostly originating from people who knew Heidi vaguely in the past. But so far, absolutely no breakthrough has been achieved by investigators. Public scrutiny quickly centered entirely on Heidi's boyfriend. This was not only because he was presumably the last person to ever see her alive, but because of the highly unusual, deeply unnatural nature of their early relationships. This older man had originally served as Heidi's official foster parent. Some media reports even classify him as her adoptive father, long before their relationship turned romantic in nature. After successfully divorcing his then wife, a woman who had previously served as a primary mother figure to Heidi, he immediately began a relationship with Heidi, who was by then a young adult. According to one investigative source, he explicitly indicated to them, "Heidi was once my foster daughter. After I divorced my wife, I started a relationship with Heidi." Heidi was already pregnant with our first child at the age of 19. This deeply disturbing guardian-turned-boyfriend dynamic has predictably prompted immense shock and public outrage in the local community and across online platforms. Many observers find it extremely difficult to grant the ex-boyfriend the benefit of the doubt, especially given this highly problematic background. The boyfriend has continuously and consistently denied any involvement whatsoever in her sudden disappearance. He firmly insists that Heidi simply left the home of her own free accord. He claims their romantic relationship had deeply deteriorated by 2010, entirely due to Heidi's alleged drug problem. By his specific account, Heidi was heavily struggling with an addiction to meth, which put an unbearable strain on their shared household. It is important to be clear here. This narrative is entirely based on his own account. At present, there are absolutely no public, medical, or arrest records confirming she ever actually had a substance abuse problem. He stated this supposed addiction prompted him to issue a harsh ultimatum: choose between the illegal substances or their children. He says that after he directly confronted her and demanded she seek professional help, events rapidly came to a head in June 2010, right before the start of the summer holidays. He claims Heidi picked up the children from school, dropped them off abruptly with his parents, telling them only, "I'm gone." She allegedly took some clothes she needed and any physical cash that was hidden in the house, and then simply vanished into the wind. The ex-boyfriend claims that he never spoke to her on the phone or saw her in person ever again. Given the extraordinary decade-long delay in officially discovering Heidi de Schepper's disappearance, the unusual case has generated intense speculation throughout Belgium. Police officials have publicly acknowledged 3 broad scenarios, explicitly stating they are not ruling anything out at this early point in the active investigation. One working theory is that Heidi left intentionally to escape her oppressive circumstances. Supporters of this idea point out that she allegedly took personal items and cash, suggesting a highly voluntary, planned departure. It is conceivable she felt deeply trapped by her supposed addiction, her undeniably troubled relationship, or her highly isolated life, and consciously decided to disappear to start over somewhere new. Her former boyfriend heavily leans toward this specific explanation. He has even speculated publicly that she might be alive and well in another country, frequently suggesting she may have quietly relocated to Spain. There are, however, incredibly serious doubts regarding Heidi having orchestrated a fresh start on her own. She had no known legal income or outside financial support at the time. Crucially, she never again attempted to contact her 3 children. Friends firmly state Heidi was a highly devoted mother, arguing she would never simply abandon her kids without a word. That being said, all investigative reports suggest that these so-called friends were more casual acquaintances than close confidants, and they may not have possessed a great deal of genuine insight into her inner emotional workings. Another possibility explored by police is that Heidi met with some form of tragic, unforeseen incident not directly caused by a third party. Perhaps completely overwhelmed by her alleged substance problem and massive domestic struggles, she may have perished either accidentally or on purpose. If her physical body was never discovered, or perhaps was found in another European country, she may have been quietly registered as a Jane Doe and simply remained undiscovered until this very day. By far the most widely discussed theory, both in mainstream media and on online investigative forums, is that Heidi was the tragic victim of foul play. Given the highly disturbing circumstances of her early life, many individuals have zeroed in entirely on the ex-boyfriend. The glaring fact that he was previously in a legal position of trust and authority as her one-time foster father, and then subsequently entered a sexual relationship with her, is deeply troubling to investigators. On top of that dynamic, his conscious decision not to report her missing, coupled with the convenient way her long absence was actively kept off the government radar, raise incredibly serious suspicions. It has been widely noted by legal experts that he effectively had 14 years to thoroughly cover up any physical evidence if he had harmed Heidi. Some behavioral commentators have accurately noted that the most physically dangerous time in any domestic violence situation is precisely when the victim finally tries to leave the abusive partner. The ex-boyfriend may have completely fabricated the story about an ultimatum regarding her substance use during the 14-year gap. He would logically know that any physical evidence would be incredibly stale by the time authorities finally investigated. It is highly notable that authorities took the aggressive step of legally detaining and thoroughly interrogating him in January 2025 as part of the reactivated official investigation. Ultimately, any of the proposed theories could theoretically hold the truth. It sounds highly plausible that Heidi was kept as a virtual prisoner by her adoptive father turned boyfriend. For obvious psychological reasons, one can clearly see why she would desperately want to escape this highly toxic situations. However, given that she likely wanted to escape, and given that volatile domestic situations tend to reach their violent crescendo during these exact times of separation, it is clear why investigators suspect the ex-boyfriend may have committed a crime. That being said, the distinct possibility of an accidental overdose, or even an intentional, tragic ending, also cannot be simply written off without evidence. Unfortunately, Heidi lived a tragic life characterized by abuse and neglect from the very moment she was born, and the immense weight of the world may have simply crushed her, regardless of the specific mechanism. The public continues to wait for a definitive update on this haunting case. On December 8, 2010, a local hunter stumbled upon a startling discovery. He found a human skull hidden deep in a wooded area, located roughly 30 yards off Pecan Valley Road near Highway 12 in Nashville, Tennessee. Absolutely no other skeletal remains were found, despite a highly rigorous search of the immediate surrounding area by police. The lone skull was subsequently sent directly to the local medical examiner's office for testing. Because only the skull was physically recovered, the exact cause of death could not be officially determined from the remains. With absolutely no immediate identification available, the unknown man was clinically referred to as the Pecan Valley John Doe in all official case records. Traditional forensic efforts initially failed entirely to identify the skull. Very few details regarding the discovery were publicly released at that specific point in time. However, in 2023, the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department boldly partnered with Othram, a specialized laboratory, to apply advanced DNA testing and forensic genetic genealogy to the cold case. Othram scientists successfully developed a comprehensive, highly accurate DNA profile from the severely degraded remains. They then conducted a massive genealogical search, which successfully pointed investigators toward potential living relatives. Finally, over 14 years after the skull's initial discovery, authorities officially announced that the remains had been conclusively identified through DNA as Marcus Rutledge. Marcus Rutledge was a student at Tennessee State University who disappeared under highly puzzling circumstances in the summer of 1990. He was last formally heard from on June 8, 1998, when he casually spoke with his girlfriend by phone around 1:30 p.m. Later that same evening, she could not physically reach him, and she officially reported him missing after he completely failed to show up as expected. When concerned family and close friends checked Marcus's apartment, they found his pet dog locked securely inside a bathroom. There were several clear indications that Marcus had abruptly left right in the middle of his daily routines. His personal car, a 1995 Plymouth Neon sporting Michigan plates, was also notably missing from his residence. About 3 full weeks later, on June 30th, 1998, Marcus's car was finally located. It was found parked quietly at the Riverwood apartment complex located on Cabot Drive in West Nashville. The recovered vehicle yielded incredibly few clues for detectives. There were absolutely no signs of a violent struggle, nor was there any blood found inside the car that could clearly indicate what had happened. Investigators did, however, find a weapon hidden inside the car. This firearm was believed to possibly belong directly to Marcus. Family members were completely unaware he even owned a weapon, and they found it highly unlikely that he would, given his generally calm personality and demeanor. But oftentimes people change in secret, and they successfully hide certain dangerous elements of their lifestyles from their immediate family. However, his ex-girlfriend specifically noted to police that she wasn't entirely surprised by the discovery. She stated Marcus had allegedly had run-ins and altercations with people in the months before he vanished. Despite extensive local searches and fairly significant local media coverage occurring at the time, absolutely no trace of Marcus was found, and the case predictably went cold. From the very outset, Metro Nashville police officially considered his sudden disappearance a highly likely slaying. This grim suspicion has only strengthened substantially now that his physical remains have been formally identified. In 2020, a dedicated cold case detective aggressively re-examined Marcus's case file. He quickly uncovered several dark secrets that Marcus had successfully kept hidden from his family. These secrets provided crucial context for possible violent motives. Investigators learned that Marcus was actually no longer actively enrolled in college at the exact time he disappeared. Furthermore, he had become heavily involved in selling small amounts of street cabbage and potentially other illicit substances merely to help make ends meet. It remains a point of deep contention among reviewers how such crucial lifestyle details completely eluded the initial police investigation. Confirming a student's enrollment status should have been a rudimentary step. According to one of the lead cold case detectives, Marcus had actively experienced several physical confrontations in the exact months prior to vanishing. Police now firmly believe his sinister side hustle directly led to his violent disappearance. Another major development that fueled rampant speculation was the brutal slaying of Marcus's best friend and former roommate, a man named Ethan Gibbs. About 8 months exactly after Marcus vanished, in February 1999, Gibbs was executed at his home by a completely unknown assailant. This highly shocking event led detectives working at the time to heavily consider a potential direct connection between Marcus's disappearance and Ethan's slaying, especially since the illicit sales were allegedly a joint venture between the two young men. However, upon a strict comparison of the two cold cases, investigators found absolutely no clear physical evidence linking the two violent incidents. A suspect was eventually charged in Gibbs's case, but the charges were later formally dropped by the state, and that specific event remains totally unsolved. While Marcus Rutledge's legal identity has now been conclusively established by science, many crucial questions about his death remain completely unanswered. The cold case is now being officially treated as an open, active slaying investigation. The Metropolitan Nashville Police Department's cold case unit continues to aggressively pursue new leads. Crucial details such as the exact manner and time of his violent death are still completely unknown, largely because only partial remains were recovered from the woods and absolutely no cause of death could be medically determined. While the incredible identification of the Pecan Valley John Doe finally gave some small measure of closure to the grieving family, the much greater mystery now desperately needs to be resolved by authorities. Who exactly ended Marcus, and why? A careful examination of room 2805 at the Oslo Plaza, one of Norway's most exclusive hotels and its second tallest building in the country, reveals a deeply unsettling scene. Taken from the perspective of the hallway, the environment appears to be a fairly standard hotel room after checkout. There is some minor rubbish left on the table by the window. A spare bedspread is rolled up neatly on a chair. The television has been left running in the corner. The bed is disturbed, with the sheets loosely pulled back. But something feels unmistakably wrong about the setting, and upon closer forensic inspection, it becomes clear that the occupant never actually checked out at all. The guest staying in room 2805 was listed on the hotel register as Jennifer Fairgate. Staff members remembered her appearing highly elegant and consistently well-dressed during her brief stay. She originally checked into the hotel on the evening of May 31st, 1995. One of the receptionists working that specific night distinctly remembers her checking in completely alone. Conversely, another staff member insists that she was accompanied by a dark-haired man. In either case, she deliberately listed a second guest on her booking form, a Louis Fairgate, and as such, she was actively given 2 electronic key cards by the front desk. According to the building's digital door lock system, over the course of the next 3 days, Jennifer used her electronic key only 5 times. She used it at 10:44 p.m. on May 31st, immediately after she initially checked in. Then again at 12 a.m. on June 1st. Next at 8 a.m. on June 1st. Then at 8 a.m. on June 2nd, and finally at 11 a.m. on June 2nd. The timeline generated by this data presents a very peculiar gap. Hotel housekeeping officially entered her room at 12:44 p.m. on June 1st and officially noted that Jennifer wasn't present. Because the digital system only logged when guests actually entered their room, not when they exited, it means that at some point between 8 a.m. and 12:44 p.m. that day, Jennifer exited her room and did not return until 8 a.m. the following morning. Where she went, or what she did, during that massive 20 to 24-hour period remains completely unknown. Later during her stay, the reception desk sent an automated message to Jennifer's television system asking her to come down to the lobby and settle her mounting pay-per-view bill. The digital message was acknowledged by a remote control pressing OK. This meant that someone was physically inside the room to see it. That exact same evening, the landline phone in her room was used to dial 2 completely non-existent phone numbers. By June 3rd, Jennifer still hadn't come down to the reception desk to settle her final bill. Furthermore, the electronic data log showed that she hadn't used her keycard to enter the room for almost 33 hours. Unless someone else was already inside the room to manually open the door for her, that meant that she hadn't left her room during all of that time. A hotel security guard was subsequently sent upstairs to check on Jennifer at around 7:50 p.m. that evening. Upon arriving at her door, he was met by a hanging "Do Not Disturb" sign. Ignoring the warning, he knocked sharply on her door. Almost immediately after his knuckles struck the wood, he heard a loud gunshot ring out from within the room. The guard quickly withdrew down the hallway to seek assistance, unfortunately leaving the active scene unattended. When he and other staff members finally returned, roughly 15 minutes later, they found that the heavy door was locked securely from the inside. After forcibly breaching the entry, they found Jennifer lying motionless on the large bed, with her legs dangling awkwardly over the edge, her feet lightly touching the floor. She had been shot directly in the center of the forehead while lying flat on her back. A 9mm Browning pistol was found resting in her right hand, positioned very gently across her chest. Her finger was still resting firmly against the trigger mechanism. 7 more live rounds were still loaded in the weapon's magazine. Curiously, she held the gun in a highly unusual reverse grip, meaning her fingers were wrapped tightly around the back of the grip, with her thumb utilized to depress the trigger. Beneath her head, investigators quickly located a pillow with a second .8 bullet hole fired completely through it. When police officers went to formally confirm the decedent's identity, they discovered a bizarre reality. Jennifer Fairgate simply didn't exist. The name was entirely an alias, one which she had suspiciously spelled 2 different ways on the hotel registration form. The Belgian home address, which she had provided when she checked in, was proven to be entirely false. The corporate company she supposedly worked for did not exist in any business registry. Every single attempt by detectives to trace Jennifer's real identity led to an absolute dead end. As a result, detectives immediately turned their attention to her registered guest, Louis Fairgate. But nobody could find a trace of him anywhere. Indeed, nobody was certain whether he had ever actually arrived at the hotel, or if he even existed as a real person. As forensic investigators began examining room 2805 more closely, the small details started to raise massive questions. They found no handbag in the suite, no driver's license, no passport, no house keys, no currency. There was absolutely nothing with which they could legally identify Jennifer. She appeared impeccably well presented, having apparently applied fresh makeup shortly before her death. Yet there were no toiletries or cosmetics found anywhere among her belongings in the bathroom. The only personal toiletry item recovered from the scene was a single bottle of men's aftershaves. For someone who had supposedly checked into a luxury hotel for multiple days, she had brought a remarkably small amount of luggage with her. Her clothing presented an equally unusual puzzle. It was all highly stylish, manufactured with great quality, but almost every single brand label had been carefully removed from the garments. The tags were not hastily torn out, they were cut out cleanly, completely stitch by stitch, as if done deliberately and methodically to prevent the clothing from ever being traced back to a specific retailer. Only one single label remained intact on her blazer, which simply read, René Lazard, a known German fashion house. Bizarrely, absolutely no clothing for the lower half of her body was found in the room, besides what Jennifer was already wearing at the time of her death. There were no extra skirts, leggings, trousers, or even spare underwear. Curiously, a pair of distinctive, colorful shoes, which a hotel maid had explicitly noticed while cleaning the room on June 1st, were notably missing from the crime scene entirely. The recovered firearm also presented massive problems for the investigation. Its unique serial number had been professionally etched away utilizing harsh acid, making it completely impossible to trace back to a manufacturer or purchaser. Near the bed, investigators found a small attaché case containing 25 additional rounds of 9mm ammunition and absolutely nothing else. But perhaps the most profoundly unsettling piece of physical evidence was a simple plastic bag containing a crisp copy of USA Today. The plastic bag was clearly marked in ink with the room number 2816. All of the other hotel guests staying on Jennifer's floor had since been formally identified and cleared by police, and all except for one. The specific guest registered in room 2816. His or her true identity remains a complete mystery to this day, though the room was most certainly occupied during the time frame in question. The guests staying in the directly adjacent suite reported hearing heavy thudding noises coming through the wall from 2816 in the early morning hours of June 3rd. A partial fingerprint found on that plastic bag was carefully analyzed by forensics. It did not belong to Jennifer, nor did it trigger a match to anyone listed on any international criminal database. The deeply suspicious circumstances surrounding Jennifer's case have left seasoned investigators and amateur internet sleuths scratching their heads for decades. One working possibility is that Jennifer was simply a highly private individual who went to extreme, calculated lengths to end her own life on her own strict terms. This specific possibility is strongly supported by the physical fact that her door was found double-locked from the inside and that a preliminary test shot had seemingly been fired into the pillow below her head. However, forensic experts found it incredibly striking that despite the vast amount of blood spatter found on the walls, ceiling, and even the gun's muzzle, there was not a single drop of blood located on Jennifer's actual hands. Furthermore, there was an absolute absence of gunshot residue or powder singeing on her skin. Many analysts have repeatedly questioned whether someone else may have executed Jennifer and then deliberately fired a second test shot into the pillow as a methodical way to stage the scene, forcibly wrapping her hand around the weapon to make her finger more firmly grip the trigger. The calculated use of aliases, the meticulous removal of clothing labels, and the total absence of any traceable personal items have led some to firmly speculate that Jennifer was deeply involved in the dangerous world of international espionage. Other hotel guests specifically noted that she spoke both English and French flawlessly, with no discernible regional accent. This specific linguistic skill is highly consistent with intelligence work, though bilingualism is undeniably common throughout Europe. Notably, she wore a Citizen Aqualand upon her wrist, a bulky, highly expensive tactical dive watch frequently associated with military operators. As posited by various television documentaries, could this event have actually been a covert job gone horribly wrong? Could Jennifer have been operating in a fragile, temporary alliance with whoever was staying secretly down the hall in room 2816? Could that adjacent room be exactly where she actually stayed for the mysteriously missing 20 to 24 hours? And finally, there are those theorists who firmly think that her fake alias, elegant attire, and bizarre overnight absence from the hotel strongly suggest that Jennifer was operating as a high-end escort. If that scenario is the case, it is highly possible a violent client, or perhaps a controlling handler, was directly responsible for whatever happened to her in that room. Then, like many vulnerable individuals working in that specific line of work, she may have been deeply estranged from her biological family. This would perfectly explain why nobody ever filed a missing persons report or actively came looking for her after 1995. In 2016, Jennifer's body was officially exhumed from its unmarked grave so that modern forensic DNA testing could be applied to her remains. The subsequent analysis indicated that she was highly likely of East German origin and was approximately 24 years of age at the exact time of her death. Still, even with this new data, no missing persons reports could be definitively linked to her profile. No estranged family members ever came forward to claim her, and no confirmed identity was ever established by authorities. And so, 31 years on, Room 2805 and its strange contents remain the only concrete clues investigators possess to work with. The enduring fascination with this case is partly due to a highly detailed digital reconstruction hosted online. A three-dimensional model created by a Norwegian publication allows users to explore room 2805 exactly as responders found it. The interactive space places users inside the eerie, almost clinical environment frozen perfectly in time, documenting a woman who arrived with absolutely no past and left behind nothing to explain why she had come to the Plaza Hotel or why she violently died there.